All right, good evening, everyone. We're going to get started here in just a moment. All right, good evening, everyone. This is our first Budget Committee meeting. Today is May 4th, 2026. We're here to discuss and deliberate on the budget for fiscal year 2027. My name is Eric Kang, and I'm the Finance Director for the City of Tigard, and I will be kicking us off today. For the first order of business, we do need to elect a Budget Committee Chair. So I just want to first start off thanking Kelly Piment for her leadership on the Budget Committee as the Chair, Emeritus, for last year, and then offering for stepping in this year. But she will be stepping down as the Budget Committee Chair, so we will need to elect a new Chair. So for first off, I want to see if there's a motion to elect a new Budget Committee Chair for this current budget cycle.
This is Councillor Schlack. I'd like to move to elect Mayor Ekang Hu as the Budget Committee Chair for this budget cycle.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. All right, the motion is adopted by unanimous vote of the Budget Committee.
All right, thank you, everyone. For those, I have some announcement. For those of you joining virtually, please remember to turn on your mic when speaking and mute your mic after you are finished. I may go around and ask each of you if you have any questions or comments prior to concluding each section of the agenda. At Budget Committee meetings, we'll be following Robert's Rules of Order. Robert's Rules of Order is the standard set of rules to run orderly meetings. The team will be capturing all our comments, questions, and requests for follow-up information if necessary. Public comment has been scheduled for 6:15 p.m. Please make sure that you have sign in to be called up on. If there are more please keep your comment to 2 minutes. If there are more than 10 people signing up, I will limit the comment to only 1 minute each for no more than 10 minutes total. The deadline for written testimony and registration for video testimony was by 12 noon on Thursday, April 30th. Budget Committee meetings will be following the same public comment protocol as the City Council meeting. All right, so City of Tigard Budget Committee is now convened. Today's goal is to hear all information on the fiscal 2026-27 proposed City of Tigard budget. That's asking by Committee Secretary Aaron McCool to conduct our roll call.
Aaron McCool, present. Ethan Postrel. Present. Derek Lawson. Kelly Piment.
Present.
William Lewis.
Present.
Youssef Alouzi.
Present.
Jeff Darland.
Present.
Mayor Ekang Hu.
Here.
Councillor Maureen Wolf.
Here.
Councillor Faraz Gadusi.
Present.
Councillor Heather Robbins.
Here.
Councillor Jake Schlack.
Here.
Councillor Jeanette Shaw.
Here.
Councillor Tom Anderson.
Here.
Youth Councillor Asher Hellick. That concludes the roll call.
Thank you, Secretary McCool. Again, I would like to thank the committee for electing me as the chair, and I would like to thank Aaron McCool for his willingness to be our committee secretary. And I would like to thank Kelly for being our previous chair. Thank you for your service. So there are a couple of housekeeping items. If you need to step away for a break, please feel free to do so. If you are a voting committee member attending virtually, please note that in the chat when you are stepping away and note in the chat when you return. If you are unable to connect to the meetings or have any technical difficulties related to the Budget Committee meeting, please call 971-203-2862. This is call in only. Texting will not work. We have about 5 minutes for introductions. So I will call each of you So when I call you, please just share briefly. For a council member, just say this is how many years you've served on a committee member. For committee members, please again say how many years you serve on it and just briefly why you are interested in serving. And we have 2 new members. So I will start with Aaron McCool.
Hello, I'm Aaron McCool. I've been a Budget Committee member. This is my 3rd cycle, and I wanted to join to have a more direct voice in how Tigard chooses to support the services that it provides.
Thank you, Aaron. Ethan Postro.
Good evening, Council. My name is Ethan Postro. This is my 2nd year as a community member on the Budget Committee, and I joined both to learn more about the city governance and also was looking for a way to volunteer, and so this seemed like a good fit.
Thank you. Derek Lawson. He's not here. Derek Lawson is not. Okay. Kelly.
Hi, Kelly Piment. I think this is my 3rd or 4th budget cycle. And I joined because I was interested in the community. I love living here and I wanted to do more to help make it cool.
Great. Bill Lewis.
My name's Bill Lewis. This is my 2nd budget cycle. I was interested in joining this particular committee because I really believe that budget documents are moral documents, how we spend our money, how we prioritize our values. It said something about that, and I wanted to participate in it.
Thank you. Yusuf.
Thank you. Yusuf Alozi, I've just started. For me, it was about volunteering, community service, and working at the level of people. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Jeff.
Jeff Garland. I've been living in Tigard a little over 20-something years. I love it here, and I've seen a lot of changes, and I'd really like to start contributing to the city, do what I can to help make it better.
Yeah, welcome to the committee, Jeff. Mayor Hu, this is my 4th cycle. Council President Wolf.
Council President Wolf, and my 4th cycle. Thank you.
Councilor Guzzi.
2nd cycle.
Councilor Robbins.
Same, this is my 2nd cycle.
Councilor Schlack.
Hi, everyone. This is my 5th cycle.
Councilor Shaw.
Counselor Jeanette Shaw, and I believe it's my 6th council.
Oh.
Sixth round.
All right. Councilor Anderson. All right. So, city teammates, please introduce yourself. I guess we'll start with Eric.
Good evening. Again, Eric Kang, Finance Director. This is my 4th budget with the City of Tigard.
Hi, I'm Brian Rager. I'm the Public Works Director and filling in as Acting City Manager. And I've been with the city for 30 years, so that might suggest that this is my 30th, but I've lost track. Thank you.
Carrie?
Hello, Carrie Anderson, IT Director. This is my second cycle.
Sambo Kirkman, Community Development Director, and also my 2nd cycle.
Anybody presenting today? I think Rick is presenting. And
I'm Nick Long. I'm with Tigard Public Works. I'm a management analyst.
How long?
For about 2 years.
Hi, I'm Laura Berry. I'm a management analyst in the Public Works Department working on the CIP, and this is my 12th budget.
Joe Barrett, Business Manager for Public Works, my 24th.
Rob Merkson, Assistant Public Works Director. This is my 19th.
Rick Gruen, Parks, Recreation, and Green Infrastructure Manager. This is my 5th.
Halstead Bernard, Library Director. This is my 7th. Jamie McDonald, the police chief. I've been with the city for almost 25 years and probably paying attention to the budget for about 15, maybe 20 of those.
Brad Sitton, police commander. Kind of the same story, 20 years, paid attention maybe the last 5 or 6.
Hi, I'm Katie Cook-Popanook. I'm the police business manager. This is my second cycle.
I'm Bob Rogers. I'm with the police department. I've been with the community for 29 years. And I've been to the budget a couple times.
James?
Thank you, sir. Good evening, all. I'm James Kennedy, and I'm the budget manager, and this will be my second budget cycle.
Keith McClung, Assistant Finance Director, and this will be my third budget cycle.
All right, is that everybody? Okay, so anybody attend virtually? Nope, okay. So let's move on to approval minutes from May 19, 2025 meeting. Copies of the summary minutes from the May 19, 2025 meeting have been provided to you electronically in advance of the meetings. Are there any additions or changes to this to the summary minutes? If none, I will entertain a motion to approve.
Chair, I move to approve the meeting minutes for May 19th, 2025.
I will second.
Thank you. I will now take roll call vote for approving the summary minutes. If you are in favor, please say yes. If opposed, please say no. So Secretary McCool, please take a roll call vote, please.
Aaron McCool, yes. Ethan Postrel.
Yes.
Kelly Piment.
Yes.
Bill Lewis.
Yes.
Yusuf Aluzi.
Yes.
Jeff Darland.
Yes.
Mayor Hu.
Yes.
Councillor Wolf.
Yes.
Councillor Gadusi. Yes. Councillor Robbins.
Yes.
Councillor Schlack.
Yes.
Councillor Shaw.
Yes.
Councillor Anderson.
Yes. The motion is adopted by a unanimous vote of the Budget Committee member present. Thank you. Next item will be receive public comment. So at the Budget Committee meeting, we follow the same public comment protocol as a City Council meeting. The protocol can be found on the city website and on the PowerPoint slide for this meeting. As a summary, remarks should be addressed to the Budget Committee as a body rather than directed to any particular member. Personal attacks or threat, disruption of the meeting, use of obscene, vulgar, or discriminatory language, or in any way discouraging anyone from participating are not acceptable. I may interrupt members of the public speaking to Budget Committee if they are not following public comment protocol, and I will enforce these rules uniformly and treat all perspective and opinion consistently. If you wish to virtually provide testimony, please join the queue by raising your head on the Microsoft Teams, or callers can use the *5 to raise or lower a hand, and use either the phone microphone button or *6 to mute or unmute. Please state your name for the record. Please speak directly into the phone and limit your comments to All right, so we have more than 10 people, so please limit your comment to 1 minute. Budget Manager James Kennedy has collected written testimony that has come to the city, and he has provided each of you with a copy. Budget Manager Kennedy, please share the summary of those written comments.
So a total of 37 public comments were received before the cutoff at 12 p.m. on Thursday, April 30th, 2026. The majority, 31 of them, were related to the Backyard Habitat Program. An additional 4 comments focused on the level of proposed reductions to library services, while 2 of the comments addressed decreased funding for community and cultural events.
So can you repeat how many from the Backyard Habitat?
There were 31 from the Backyard Habitat.
Okay, 31 Backyard Habitat, 4 library, 2 on community and culture events. Thank you. So I have 15 people sign up for personal comment. I can let you decide what you want to do. I can if you just want to talk to about library, I can give you 2 minutes, or if you all want to talk, I can give you 1 minute. So I will call the first person to testify is Jessica F.
Yeah, there wasn't room for my last name.
Okay.
It's a very small sign-in sheet.
Okay, so could you please go there?
So just to clarify, what were the two options?
So what would you like to, what specific topic would you like to provide? Okay. All right, so you have either 1 minute for the library or 2 minutes for the library or?
I think it's just 1 minute because more than 50.
Yeah, just 1 minute, yeah, okay, yeah. So can we have a 1 minute timer on the screen, please? Okay, we don't have that set up. Okay, so please just state your full name and where you live, and you have 1 minute.
My name is Jessica Fredrickson. Good evening, members of the Budget Committee. I work at the Tigard Public Library. I live in McMinnville. And tonight I'm speaking for myself and not as a representative of the city. Just speaking for myself as a library worker and a longtime library worker and a lifetime library lover. I want to start tonight by thanking city leadership for the difficult decisions that you've had to make and the hard work that you've had to do with this challenging budget cycle. And I'm here tonight to ask that committee continue this hard work and revisit some of those hard decisions, which the library director will share in later detail tonight. I have worked in public libraries for more than a decade, and during that time, I have had to help with a lot of hard things. But the hardest things and the most frequent things I am asked to do have to deal with finding housing, food, shelter, and other social services needs. Cutting our library connection to social services will have a dramatic and a disastrous effect on both community members and staff. I hope there will be an opportunity to present my full comments because the website says 3 minutes and it doesn't say that comment will be abbreviated. So I hope I can submit those in writing later.
Yes, we will have at least two more meetings, so we will continue to review comments, so thank you.
And I hope we update the website to accurately reflect our public comment practice.
Holly? Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Holly Campbell-Polivka, and I live in Tigard. Because we were told we would have, I think, 3 minutes, can you make a change tonight so that we can have the full time?
No.
Okay. So I've worked at the library for 18 and a half years. I see several regular library users here. I'm happy to see you. I want to thank you all for the work that you're doing and the difficult decisions that you're making. And I'm just going to get right down to it. I don't have great understanding about how budgets work, but from what I figured out, there's about an 8% total cut from the general fund. 19.5% of that is coming from the library. Police is under 1%, and then I know Public Works gets their funding from somewhere else, but their cuts right now are under 2%. So of the proposed $4.5 million that are being cut, $1.9 million is coming from the library, or is proposed to come from the library. That's almost 43% of the total cuts that have been proposed. And it, to me, feels unfair, unequitable. It feels like we're being betrayed.
Your time's up. All right, next one we have is Ryan Starr. Oh, Rain Star, sorry. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Rin Starr. I'm a Tigard resident. I'm also the social services coordinator for the Tigard Public Library. And one thing that you might know about the budget cycle is that the proposed budget has drastic impacts on the library, including the elimination of my position. I've only been here about 18 months, but in that time, I've helped over 1,300 community members through different interactions, and I provided more than 700 direct referrals to community organizations for different needs like housing, food, healthcare, public benefits, all sorts of things. We know that there are systemic issues and that this is not going to be fixed in a single budget cycle. And we also know that the needs of our community, the social service needs of our community, are increasing, not decreasing. A budget priority for this year is to adjust library services while continuing to meet community needs. And I need to be clear that the elimination of this position does not meet the community or the library's needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert, can you reset the timer, please? Oh, okay. Well, I think Finance Director Ken would keep track. Jeremy?
Stoffel.
Oh, Jenny, sorry, I can't read. Good evening.
Okay, good evening, Budget Committee, and thank you for your work. I serve as the Vice Chair of the Tigard Public Library Board, and I'm a Tigard resident. Tonight, I want to speak out something that won't show up clearly in a budget line, the unquantifiable value of a library card. It may look small, but it represents a free, open door to knowledge, opportunity, technology, support, and to one another. Its true value shows up in moments we can't always predict or easily count. We hear from patrons who describe the library as a home away from home, a place of safety, dignity, and access to basic needs. That experience is part of what makes a library, what a library card makes possible. It's also what makes roles like our social services coordinator, Rin, so vital. Over the past year, that position supported more than 1,300 interactions connecting community members to food, housing, and mental health resources. They distributed nearly 4,000 basic needs items and welcomed 135 attendees to drop-in support hours, meeting needs that go far beyond traditional library services. Additionally, the youth services team...
Your time's up.
Oh, thank you for your consideration.
Yeah. Anybody can continue to submit written comments. We'll continue to evaluate them. Next one is Piper, or P-I-P-E-R, I think. Oh, there you go. Good evening.
Good evening. This was timed to 2 minutes and 53 seconds based on the same information that has caused confusion for everyone else, but I will abbreviate this. I am also here. My name is Piper Rucker. I am a resident of Tigard. I am also an employee of the library, but I am here representing myself. I'm also here to talk to you about the Social Services Coordinator position. I think that you already have been told by some of the previous people what this position is, so I'll just say that I work on the front line at the library. I'm often the first person that people interact with when they come into the library. People who come into the library, many of them, an increasing number, are out of work and out of jobs. When they come into the library, they are scared, hungry, and I do my best to help these people. But it will be much, much harder without a social services coordinator. Thank you.
Thank you. Caleb Peterson?
Hi, my name's Caleb. I live in Portland, but I work as the behavioral health specialist at Just Compassion. Rin and I have worked together a lot. I think, we talk a lot about houselessness in the community. We do all kinds of services. We are providing safe parking programs. We're passing ordinance and amending ordinance. We're doing so much work, but I think what is not talked about enough is what we are doing to prevent people from falling into houselessness. And I think that is the most significant role that Rin plays to me, is they are a resource that people can go to when they are afraid and when they are looking for help. And that's what libraries are all about. They're a community resource for people to have access to any information and resources. And the phrase that keeps sticking with me is, what is more punk rock than the public library? Thank you.
Thank you, Caleb. So I'm going to make some decision right now because we only have 10 minutes total for public comment. Elena, are you going to say anything different? Who's?
I mean, I'm also commenting about the social services coordinator.
Do you agree with everything that's been said so far?
Yes.
All right, so I'm just going to skip you because I only have 10 minutes. So thank you. You can always provide written comments. We read each one of them. So, yeah. All right. So let's move on to Micah Maskill. Good evening.
Good evening, Budget Committee. My name is Micah Maskill, and I'm the Urban Conservation Director for Bird Alliance of Oregon. My work spans many jurisdictions where I follow budget deliberations, and I want to start with thanking you for your public service and empathize with you as you navigate a very tough budget cycle. I'm here tonight to talk about a program that we co-lead with Columbia Land Trust, the Backyard Habitat Certification Program, its history of collaboration with the City of Tigard, and our future. The program centers itself on building wildlife habitat and community across the region, planting native plants, treating stormwater on site, and reducing pesticides. Backyard Habitat has been a proud partner with the City of Tigard since 2019, working together on our joint goal of building carbon-responsive communities through engaging residents where they live, work, and play. To date, we have worked with over 200 residents and continue to see exciting demand, enrolling around 30 properties per year. We additionally work with community sites such as Good Neighbor Center, Just Compassion, and Brookside HOA. We're finishing up the first year of a 3-year funding contract with the city in which we are continuing to build great momentum, but we are very disappointed to learn that the proposed budget proposes to end our current contract. We understand it is often a strategy during tough budget years to first reduce or eliminate contracting services, and we are concerned for what that means for our program in Tigard. We hope that you all as a council and budget committee will consider how you might be able to keep our contract in place or contemplate at least a partial funding for the programming in the upcoming budget to allow for us to sustain our work in Tigard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And another one on Backyard Habitat is Ding. Good evening.
Good evening. Thanks for the chance to comment. My name is Dean Moberg. I live in the Cedar Mill area of Washington County, and I'm here today on behalf of the Tualatin Soil and Water Conservation District. We are a local agency that helps people in Washington County, people of forest land, farmland, and city residents, whether they own land or not, to conserve natural resources. At our April board meeting of the Conservation District, our board voted unanimously to reach out to the city to ask you to consider funding for the Backyard Habitat Program. I was the guy who was elected to come tonight. The Backyard Habitat Program is an effective and economical way for the residents of Tigard to provide habitat for pollinators, songbirds, other wildlife species. It also helps residents protect water quality, reduce pesticide use, and planting the native trees and shrubs helps to sequester carbon, meeting your carbon goals. The Tualatin Soil and Water Conservation District provides support in excess of $50,000 because we really believe in this program. So I hope whether you can fund it entirely or partially that you will consider doing that. Thanks again for the chance to come. Especially want to thank the community members. We have the same budget process, and you guys are just essential to democracy, so thank you for your volunteer service.
Thank you, Dean. Lee, you put on both library and community events. Where's Lee?
That's me.
Yeah.
And may I draw your attention to the folks waiting in the lobby who've made time to be here? Are we going to ask each of them whether they share the same opinion or the dissenting opinion with all the other?
This is not for you to ask questions. Would you like to testify on the?
I would like to give my time to the folks in the lobby, including the underage folks in our community who chose to be here tonight and probably had to make some concessions to be here.
I'm sorry, I can't accommodate that. We only have 10 minutes for the comment. So,
Okay,
would you like to take 1 minute?
Okay, thank you all. Obviously, the shortened time is an issue for all of us because we have a lot to say. I'm just speaking from the heart as a private citizen. I appreciate that in tough times you have to make tough decisions, but the fact that the budget is cutting things from the most vulnerable members of our community as the first step is incredibly discouraging. You have folks who do not have the ability to represent themselves in this room who are under-resourced, and you're cutting from them first. It's difficult. Obviously, it causes a lot of emotion. And you have more people out here who want to comment. You also have voters who voted to fund the library services. I don't know how many people voted compared to how many people are in this room, but you have a mandate to fulfill the will of the people who voted for library services, not cut them. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah, Anna, and Micah, do you disagree with any of the comment about libraries so far?
We don't disagree, but we would like a chance to speak.
You have opportunity to submit comments. Written comment it can come next time, and we read every comment. So we read every comment. So we have to accommodate everybody in 10 minutes.
Teenagers out here who came together to represent teen voices about their library. Would you please be willing to let them speak? They all took time out of their busy schedules to advocate.
I'm sorry, I cannot do that. So, all right, let's move on to Harrier. Who's Harrier?
That was Sarah. Is Sarah allowed to speak?
This one.
Apparently not. You said no.
Yeah.
Brings for younger. I'm not sure what the Harriet is that.
Harriet?
That's what it looks like.
Okay. I'm going to invite Alan Brown.
So hang on. Can Sarah speak because she was called and she was under the impression that she was being told no?
Right. So, because she agreed with all the comment with libraries so far.
She also said she wanted to make a comment.
Is she disagreeing with any library comments?
She has some different points she would like to make.
Just because I'm not disagreeing with what's been already said doesn't mean I don't have more to add. We all have more to add.
Alan Brown, please.
What was that?
No, you can submit public comments online or you can come next time. We only have 10 minutes.
I understand that there are restrictions, but we specifically want to focus on teen library services, which have not been talked about.
You can provide a written comment and we read every single one of them.
I understand that.
All right, Alan, can you come in?
Hi, I wasn't expecting to testify tonight, but I was bringing my daughter who wanted to talk for teen library services. So I've been a resident of Tigard for about 14 years. I've been a member of the PRAB for 8, and I've been chair for the last 3. When I first moved here, we were a whisker away from losing our rec program altogether, and we've been very successful in building that into a very vibrant program with really few resources. You know, a budget is not just a tool, it's a moral document that reflects the values of our community. And, you know, when we acquire the park's properties, we made a commitment to the public to maintain those properties. And that's visible to the public as to where their tax dollars are going. It's cheaper to maintain our property than to manage deferred maintenance. And you know, compared to the national averages, we are at the very low end of staffing and budget for a city our size. I'm incredibly proud of the work that our teams are doing. And it's really important that we maintain as much of the park's budget as we possibly can, and also our teen library programs as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. All right, that's the 10 comments we have time for today. Again, thank you for all the community members for taking the time to make comments today. We appreciate all their interest in the budget. Again, any additional public testimony or question that don't get answered or expressed today can be submitted for public comment at our subsequent meetings on May 11th and May 18th, or you may submit written public testimony. We read every single one of them. All right. So let's move on to our city manager budget message, and Brian Rager, our acting city manager, will provide the budget messaging. Good evening, Brian.
Good evening, Budget Committee members, city staff, and members of the public. I just want to take a few minutes and thank you all for the time that you're going to spend with us in reviewing the fiscal 27 budget. To our community member volunteers, I know you could be doing other things with your time tonight, but we're really happy you're here and thankful that you're going to use your time to review this budget with us. So I'm guessing by now you've read the budget message and you've made your way through the proposed budget, and obviously this is a year where we're coming at you with some tough decisions, some decisions that we made in proposing this budget. The trouble is always with the general fund. That's the one that has the limitations on growth of revenue. You'll hear Director Kang say that as far as revenue coming in, the general fund does have revenue coming in. The problem is the limits on how much revenue. Measures 5 and 50 limit the growth of that revenue by 3%. And the problem is the expenditures that we've experienced over the last 5 or so years has outpaced the ability for the general fund to keep up. During COVID and after, some well-intentioned and good programs were added, and you're seeing in this proposed budget that some of those things are proposed for elimination. It comes down to setting priorities. As we, the leadership team, got into budget preparation, Director Kang let us know that there's a gap in the general fund, and it was around $6 million. And with a gap that big, it's you know, the immediate is to try to look for savings in the easy things, training or materials. But with a gap that big, you just can't get there with that level. So Acting City Manager Trich gave a directive to all department directors to prepare 10% cut packages for their parts of the budget that hit the general fund. And so we all did that. We got together and went over those proposed cuts, and we took into account, we asked ourselves, what does the community want? And one source for that we used was the National Community Survey that's done every 2 years. We also considered other forms of feedback, such as post-event surveys that are done and other surveys. And in the end, we focused on these priorities: public safety, ensuring our infrastructure is well-maintained, and we need to meet legal and contractual obligations. At a more granular level, these priorities led us to minimizing the impact on police services, maintaining current levels of service for existing facility maintenance, parks and recreation, and development and permitting. We did make some adjustments or proposed adjustments in library services, but the library is still able to provide the basic core library services to the community that it has. A little bit of a soapbox on my part regarding core services. I've been on leadership teams since 2014, and we've had a variety of conversations about core services over the years, and it's sometimes a very uncomfortable conversation, because if you deem one service core, does that mean other services are not important? And the answer is no. When I think of core services, I'm thinking of our outward-focused core services, library being one of them. And you've got the police that brings the public safety. You've got Public Works that is out there maintaining the infrastructure that the community's invested in. But we need our central services as well: finance, IT, HR. We need those services to be solid so that the core outward-focused services can do what they need to do. So why is this important? Again, we need to ask ourselves, what does the community actually want? And when we look at the sources that I listed or I mentioned earlier, it comes down to safety, it comes down to parks and rec, library, infrastructure, upkeep, and permitting services. These are the outward services. We really need to do these well. Because if we don't do these well, I think it's going to be really hard to ask the community for something else. So it comes down to, for me, just as I look at it, it comes down to the nice-to-haves versus the must-haves. So what are the trade-offs? You know, we hit the low-hanging fruit first, and there were some vacant positions. We wanted to minimize to the extent possible the impact on positions that are occupied. We weren't able to do that, but for the most part, we took vacant positions. So there's 3 in the city manager's division. The DEIB manager is 1. There was a second assistant city manager position and a strategic initiatives coordinator position. All good positions, but again, comes down to the nice-to-haves versus the must-haves. Every department made reductions in their budgets toward professional services and materials and services. We had to reduce some programs, partnerships, grants, and community events. You'll hear more about that later. And we lowered some levels of service in departments or programs with some impacts to current employees. And looking ahead, I'd love to tell you that this is it, that this year would be it, but we think we will likely be back here again next year. It's just a tough time. We'll continue to focus, all of our departments will continue to focus and be disciplined. But again, we have to do the basics. It's getting back to the basics and doing those really, really well. We'll continue to look for efficiencies in those programs, and we'll look for innovations. Again, I want to thank you all for the time you're going to spend with us. We will welcome your suggestions and your questions. And I also want to thank my fellow department directors who you'll hear from over the next several weeks as they speak about their respective departments and their proposed budgets. Thank you.
Thank you, Acting City Manager Rager, for your presentation on the budget message. Before we move on, are there any questions or comments? All right, seeing none, our next item of business is to hear budget in brief, revenue overview and long-term financial forecast from Budget Manager James Kennedy and Eric Kane, Finance Director.
All right, thank you, Budget Committee members, and thank you, Chair. If we could move on to the next slide, please. So I just wanted to start off and review the budget calendar. So I just wanted to introduce this new format to everyone that's on the Budget Committee. So for those who have been here last year or prior to, the schedule for presentations has been modified. So we are going to be presenting department budgets based on some of the feedback we received in the prior year. So we'll be hearing directly from departments. We have broken up the presentations to be thematic. So the presentations for tonight will be focused on community services that are mostly relying on the general fund. On the following evening, on the 11th, we will be presenting budgets for development permitting and then all of central services. And then lastly, on the 18th, you'll be hearing from utilities, infrastructures, and redevelopment, and consider the budget approval on that night. And then tentatively, we do have May 27th, which is a Wednesday. It's placed on hold if another evening is needed for further discussion. And furthermore, I just want to address that there will be opportunities for public comment during each of those evenings as well. Next slide, please. All right, so some of these numbers may be familiar to you. If you've looked at the budget in brief, this is a snapshot in time of what we're proposing in the fiscal year 27 budget. I won't jump into this detail quite yet. If we can go to the next slide. So looking at appropriations first. So when we look at the budget, the total appropriations is kind of the last step in terms of what the Budget Committee is approving. And so just as at a high level, the total appropriations for the fiscal year 27 is budgeted at $218 million, which is about $22 million or 9% less than in fiscal year 26. The biggest decline from the prior year is primarily due to reductions in capital improvement projects, which is about $11 million, reductions in debt services for completion of Parks Bond debt service, and then a $6 million reduction in transfers. The reductions in operations is approximately $3 million from the prior year, and that's primarily due to cost reductions in the general fund. Next slide, please. So I know on the slide it's a little hard to read because it's a little small, but I just wanted to give this as a visual diagram of really where our cost categories are as a city. So overall, from an operations standpoint, as you would expect, personnel services or people costs represent more than half of our overall costs. And so that's really what this diagram is supposed to indicate. Next slide, please. And then we will look at operations by program. And so this is the breakout of what you would see on the schedule of appropriations of how all of our costs get broken out and what the Budget Committee would be ultimately responsible for approving. And so the thing that I would highlight on here that would stand out to me is what our total debt service amount. We are looking at a 3% for debt service for fiscal year 27, or $7.6 million. Overall in a budget appropriation of $218 million. So we have reduced that number, but overall, yeah. Next slide, please. And again, this is a breakout of our general fund, so shifting gears a little bit. So the previous slides, you were looking at kind of a citywide overarching view. This is more of a snapshot view of the general fund specifically, which is our most discretionary fund. So it's kind of difficult to see on here because some of the services are broken out, but overall, 55% of the general fund is spent on police services or public safety. And that might not jump out at you because that's broken out into 3 different colors in there, which is the blue, teal, and green section of the pie. And then for the other areas of the budget, for public-facing services, about 17% is for library, community development is at 12%, and then municipal court is at 4%. Next slide, please. So I did want to take a moment to talk, give you a snapshot of our revenue and give you an idea of what that's looking like for this year. So it's important to note that our total resources for the general fund is $77 million, and without factoring our reserves, it's roughly $46.3 million forecasted for annual revenues. And as you would expect, property taxes are the largest portion of the revenues at 49%. And we will cover some of the assumptions at a later slide in just a moment. So I won't go into some of those details quite yet, but overall, we are expecting revenues to be roughly flat with fiscal year 26. However, I do want to caveat that that is due to some one-time unexpected revenues received in fiscal year 26 with the expiration of a GO bond. Without factoring that one-time revenue source, revenues are expected to increase by 6% overall. But that is primarily due to additional revenues that we're receiving from IGAs that are currently in negotiations. If these negotiations are not successful, we will need to revise down our estimates and consider reductions in this budget cycle. Next slide, please. All right, so I want to share a slide that has kind of a snapshot of all the proposed changes from the prior fiscal year to the proposed. So as you can see, most of the impact and reductions are to the general fund. As you heard from the budget message, the fund that is facing the most fiscal challenges for this upcoming year is within the general fund. And again, we'll talk more about kind of the forecast and some of the assumptions behind that in a moment. The other area I would highlight is for central services. And central services is our basically all of our administrative support services for departments. As acting city manager, Rager pointed to, that's like your finance, HR, technology, so those types of services that all the outward-facing services depend on to do their work. So we do have some reductions within that fund as well. Overall, the proposed FTE reduction is 11.4 overall. And so that is the budget in brief at a very high level. I'm happy to answer any questions at this point. Okay, well, I'll turn it over to Budget Manager James Kennedy to go over the forecast then.
Good evening, all. Thanks for being here tonight. If you could go to the next slide, please. So we are going to go over everyone's most exciting thing in the world is some forecasting on both our revenues and expenditures for the city of Tigard this evening. So a couple high-level basics is we're going to show the where, when, and how of sort of the different financial decisions that have been made over the last 6 to 8 months, as well as talk about some of the assumptions set by our multi-departmental teams, sort of collaborating throughout the city on figuring out what these assumptions and forecasts may look like. Generally speaking, the expenditures are forecasted based on historical expenditure rates as well as expected future scenarios. And these are all built around, known decisions and proposed service levels from all of our different departments. Next slide, please. So a base condition for the forecast involves sort of 3 different economic environments. That includes our U.S. and local economy, general inflation, and some of our development and population growth. I won't read line by line, but a couple high-level items are that GDP growth in 2025 was 2.7%. That's in line with the CPI West inflationary index as well. That percent increase has primarily impacted compensation in the future, as well as vehicle prices, technology, and some of our capital project expenditures. There is also the geopolitical risk of impacts of inflation to the cost of oil and other available raw materials. As far as development and population growth go, we are still looking at future possible development at River Terrace, Tigard Triangle, and other developments that will continue into fiscal year 2027 and beyond. We are currently forecasting a long-term population growth to be 0.75% per year. Next slide, please. And then on the revenue side of things, as mentioned previously, we are capped at a 3% growth on property taxes. However, with the possibility of new development, we also have an additional 1% built into our forecasts for the revenue associated with that development. Long-term rate for hotel tax is projected at 1%, conservatively, as well as a decline seen for fiscal year 2027 based on current year-to-date collections in fiscal year 2026. We do collect franchise fees here at the City of Tigard. And as mentioned, they grow, that growth varies based on the source. Both of our electricity and natural gas franchise fees are expected at about 3.5% in fiscal year 2027, and conservatively 1.2% projected thereafter. Our solid waste franchise fees, as you can see, are 3% in 2027, and again, a conservative 1% growth thereafter. And as we've mentioned before, some of the static growth and even slight decline seen in cable TV and telecom is due to some of that quote-unquote cord-cutting trends that you've been seeing where people are streaming instead of paying for television and cable TV. The library support from Washington County, WCCLS, is expected a 5% growth in fiscal year 2027 and a 2% year-over-year growth in future years. Next slide, please. And a few other revenue assumptions to mention here is a conservative gas tax growth of 1% in fiscal year 2027 and into the future, with some current legislation and some uncertainty around how that will land. Some conservative forecasts are being used, as well as some assumptions around fuel efficiency standards and a shift to some electrical and alternative fuel vehicles. A big one to mention for fiscal year 2027 is going to be our revenue from traffic fines for our red light program. Due to a new vendor, the city is expecting to see close to a 20% increase from our fiscal year 2026 budgets, and that is based on current year-to-date revenues and forecasts that have been built between our department teams. Investment incomes projected at 4% of fund balance reserves for 2027 and consistently for the next 5 years. So interest rates continue to relatively hold, but Federal Reserve has signaled possible cuts in 2026 and beyond, so we'll continue to monitor this over the next 5 years. And utility sales are based on existing rate study models and vary throughout our systems. Next slide, please. One back. Thank you, sir. Okay, so for compensation COLA, sorry, I'm going to speed it up a little bit. Our projected forecasted expenditure assumptions are based off of CPI West, which was 2.7%, and built into the SEIU CBA collective bargaining agreement was a CPI West +1. So we were forecasting a 3.7% increase to salaries. We have a long-term placeholder of 4% built into our forecasts for future years, and the city is experiencing an 11% increase on our health insurance, and we are forecasting a 10% increase in the out years. And then other benefits mirror the compensation increases as well. And for fleet, IT, and facilities, a couple assumptions that were built into the forecast was we extended the life of police vehicles in our replacement schedule, which decreases the annual expenses for future replacements. And we are proposing, in order to preserve general fund dollars for fiscal year 2027 and beyond, that we take a 1-year break from paying into our facility replacement fund, as it currently holds over a $7 million fund balance. Next slide. Director Kang sort of mentioned this earlier, but this is just a graph to show you the red line above is our growth of expenditures and the green line below is our revenue growth, showing that over the next 5 years, our expenditure growth will continue to outpace our revenues. You're seeing about a 4% growth in expenses and a 2.5% growth in revenue. Next slide. So prior to the fiscal year 2027 cycle in November 2025, this is what the general fund projection, fund balance, revenue, and expense forecast looked like. As you can see, within fiscal year 2030 and 2031, we were coming close to being under our minimum reserve policy of 25%. Next slide. So what we did to fix it was we eliminated several vacant positions across the organization, reduced overall spending on professional services, materials, and some of our contracts, as well as Acting City Manager Brian Rager mentioned, reducing some of the funding for our programs, partnerships, and some community events throughout the city. We lowered some service levels in specific areas with some impacts to existing employees. And so those decisions and trade-offs were made based on the budget priorities mentioned previously, which was to minimize impacts to police services, maintain current service levels for some of our existing infrastructure, and adjust library services while continuing to meet community needs. Next slide, please. So what we've achieved through these strategies and priorities is we've stabilized near-term budget gaps. As Director Kang mentioned earlier, we're trying to reduce resilience on those one-time solutions, as well as strengthening our reserves and cataloging our programmatic budgets. As mentioned before, our revenue is slowing down in some of our economically sensitive revenues, and some of those contractual obligations and inflationary impacts still exist within our expenses. So through multi-year financial planning, corrective actions, and a shared responsibility, we're going to try to fix this over the next 2 to 3 years. Next slide. And this has been touched on multiple times, but the bottom line is that we're trying to focus on our reserves stabilizing as opposed to subsidizing our existing infrastructure and expenses at the City of Tigard. Next slide, please. And so this is where we are now. Reserves would still continue to be drawn down, and we still have a funding gap. However, that forecast is looking a little bit brighter over the next 5 years. Next slide, please. Here's a general picture of some of the parks funds, which you've all heard about over the last few weeks on council as well. We're looking at about $30 million in CIP projects in our parks capital. SDC revenues in fiscal year 2025 were under budget, and we're still seeing a decline in fiscal year 2026, which is going to be forecasted into our fiscal year 2027 proposed budget. The Parks Utility Fund is a conversation with revenue growth expected at 4.26% as per our fee and charges schedule, but with it being reliant on transfers from the general fund, given the current program expenditures, that fee or transfer from the general fund will need to be reviewed. Next slide, please. These are our transportation funds. Gas tax, TDT, transportation SDCs, street maintenance fee, and transportation CIP. As you can see, reserves are expected to be drawn down in the next few years due to some of our capital improvement projects. And the same trend happens within our transportation SDCs as we've seen with parks, as our reserves are being drawn down and our future forecasted revenues are slowing. Next slide, please. Sorry for the small graphs. Here are our water, sewer, and stormwater funds. We are averaging anywhere between a 3 and a 3.75% growth annually for these funds. As far as water SDCs, it is the same picture seen across the city with slowdown of SDC revenues. In the water fund, we will be funding over $93 million over the 5-year period. And an updated rate study will be required to ensure that these reserves stay above our minimum targets set. Next slide. And the transient lodging tax fund. So future revenues are basically flat over the next 5 years, as they're expected to have the same moderate volatility in revenue that we're seeing with the rest of our streams in Tigard. Those expenses include a 50% transfer to the general fund for existing services. And the city is proposing $100,000 to fund community event grants with currently $50,000 allocated. Next slide. All in all, the general fund has a structural deficit. Expenses expected to exceed revenues. We're slowing down in revenue growth and expenses continue to climb. Vacancy and operating savings have closed the gaps in previous years. However, with our reduction in vacancies, we will not be expected to see that same savings. Revenue streams are expected to stay flat with some declining, and overall, we're only expected to see that 2.5% revenue growth that I mentioned earlier. The big ones to think about are the gaps in Park and Recs funding, which entails either an increase to a general fund transfer or a review of the Park and Recreation fee as a whole in order to sustain our current programming levels set. And I think that's all I have for you.
Thank you. Any quick comments or questions before we move on? Well, go ahead, Councilor Shaw.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Budget Manager James Kennedy. Question with regards to the key expenditure assumptions, fleet, IT, and facilities equipment replacement. You had mentioned that there is a recommendation proposing a 1-year break from paying into the facility replacement fund. And having read through this, I did not get the answer to my question, which is, what would the average yearly amount would have been spent from this facility replacement fund?
So the expenses to the departments to pay into the facility fund citywide was about $1.4 million. $700,000 effect to the general fund.
Councilor Schlack?
Sort of in line with Councillor Shaw, I was curious why we weren't considering pauses to other ISFs at this time, just the facility one.
Could you clarify that question one more time? Sorry, I missed the first part of it.
Sorry, I was thinking about how we have multiple sort of ISF funds, like the facility fund. I was wondering why we were just pausing that particular one as opposed to other ones.
So that was a policy recommendation based on fund balance adequacy, experience use, facility replacements. Also, we have three ISF funds, and the fleet ISF and technology ISF funds are the other reserve balances that we use to replace basically all the assets that we already have. It's kind of similar to like a depreciation fund for those that are not familiar with the ISF, to ensure that we can replace the assets that we already own. And so those two other funds have been much more tight in terms of experience rating, so did not recommend pausing those two.
And then just in general, since we're talking about that 25% reserve and wanting to use that to stabilize but not subsidize, I just wanted to understand if 25% is sort of a best practice level of reserve for municipal governments, or if it's more of a conservative approach on the city of Tigard's perspective.
In my professional opinion, 25% is about average. It's not high, it's not low, it's pretty average. The GFOA recommends a minimum of 2 months, and again, that's a minimum. However, I will highlight that we are AAA bond rated for our general fund by S&P, and generally they recommend having a reserve balance of 35% if you want to maintain your AAA bond rating. But again, that would be a policy question whether or not that is something that the council would prioritize.
All right. Thank you. Let's move on to the police department presentation of budget. And I will introduce Police Chief Jamie McDonald for the presentation. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council, Budget Committee members. Thank you for having us here tonight. Again, Jamie McDonald, I'm your police chief, and tonight I have with me Katie Cook-Papanuk. She is our business manager in the police department. And to be perfectly honest, it is something we can't actually do without the support of our professional staff. And you'll hear a little bit more about that through our budget presentation this evening. And you also we're introduced to the two commanders, Bob Rogers and Brad Sitton. They are here tonight as well. So let's go ahead and get started. Next slide, please. This is what we do. We protect and serve all who live, play, and work in Tigard. That photo is from National Night Out last year. We were out in the community working to build those relationships in the community, because we know that building relationships and building trust with your police department is one of the core things that we do to make sure that this community can trust their police department to do what they expect us to do. Next slide, please. So this is it. We're going to talk about what you already have been hearing tonight about the challenging budget climate that we're in, and how do we meet the expectations of Tigard every day. How do we identify where our resources are going to be allocated and at what level? And then really it's about that meeting the expectations of our community. Next slide, please. So here we are talking about our alignment with council goals. So if we look at strategy 2.1, we're committed and involved with our commercial crimes unit. The commercial crimes unit is actually a little bit unique in that it's funded through business license fees. So it isn't actually a general fund draw specifically, because our business community helps to support those. And then we also are seeing, trying to leverage some other opportunities to either create revenue or remove some of that burden off of the general fund with some unique positions, and we'll talk about those a little bit. One of them is organized retail theft detective, which we've already started as a part of this. And then strategy 3.4, we connected with over 13,000 community members in 2025. And I already mentioned that piece about building trust. It's also about transparency as well. And those 13,000 community members often are allowed to ask us any question they want. You should be able to ask your police department, anybody in the department, any question you want. Now, obviously, we're not going to share personal information, things like that. But it's part of what we do in order to maintain the quality of police services this community expects. Next slide, please. So for FY27, that is our budget amount. We have some different impacts on our budget that are causing, that we really don't have any control over. For example, WACA that you see there, that's our dispatch service. So we pay currently $843,000 and some change to have that service provided to us. For next year, it's going to be $885,000. We don't get an opportunity to decide how much they charge us. Now, I'm on the budget committee, so is Finance Director Kang for WACA, and we punch them pretty hard with questions and try to hold them accountable. But the fact is their costs continue to rise just like ours do. We also have Axon, and Axon is a wide suite of technology that we use. My body camera right here is one of those. We have contractual obligations there. There's escalators that are built into those contracts, which is very common with technology contracts, as I'm sure the IT director could let you know probably way more astutely than myself. But the total contract for that over a 5-year period is nearly $2 million. And then photo enforcement, which was mentioned earlier, that's a part of our budget that gets paid out of that. That increases at up to 4% annually. And so for FY27, it'll be about $450,000 and some change. A couple of the things we have done, though, to try and leverage some of the things there. Many of you are aware of the enterprise system Tyler technologies that we use. Just in the last month, we've switched over from the old alarm permitting system and now do it through Tyler. We expect to save, it's not huge, but every penny counts, between $15,000 to $30,000 annually by switching over onto the Tyler system. So really trying to focus on leveraging that and some other things that we're also working on. Next slide, please. You heard it earlier. Personnel services are the biggest cost driver for us. 71% of what we spend in the police budget is labor cost. 9% increase is a pretty significant increase. Much of that is driven through contractual obligations the city has with our police union, and we see those across the city with both of the unions that we have. We did keep our materials and services part of the budget very close to flat. When we started this process, we were told by the finance team, you need to start at zero and build up from there. So we start at zero and then you restart your budget each year. We did that last year, we did it again this year. But materials and services is only up just over $12,000. That's an 11% part of our budget, but the important part of that is to understand those contracts that I just mentioned, those are all a part of our materials and services budget. So we took a scalpel to the rest of that budget and cut out whatever we could, trying to be intentional about making sure that we could still continue to provide the level of service that this community expects from us. And we had no way to control any of those contractual expenses. So we were very intentional about what we did. I have some lieutenants that got very good education in the budget process this year. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about the programs that we've identified that we use the general fund or use our budget, not just the general fund, because in our budget is also the public safety levy and then any of the other revenues that we may get. So one of those I mentioned was the organized retail theft detective. I'll go into more detail on that in a future slide. But these are the things that you'll see in the upcoming slides. Next slide, please. Response. It's 53% of our budget. And when you think of response, this is the 911 call responders, the men and women in uniform that are out there responding to calls 24 hours a day. It's an incredibly large part of what we do. It's the most visible part of what we do, and it's what this community expects, a high quality of service to respond to those 911 calls. And it's also our traffic safety unit, some of the county-wide teams that we're a part of, crisis negotiations team, the SWAT team, it's called TNT in Washington County, but that's also included in here. And then emergency management. So we work very closely with the city's emergency management team that's out of Public Works, and all of the command team in the police department has been trained at a pretty high level in the national incident management system. Next slide, please. Process. So we really owe it to the community to do our best while we're investigating crimes, to preserve crime scenes, make sure that we collect evidence, that we do what you expect of a police department. The documentation of those crimes is a really big part of it. One of the things that you see and that you saw in one of the earlier slides is a reduction in 1 FTE in the police department. That's a record specialist. It's a professional support staff. Professional support staff is what keeps our officers out on the road when they need to be out responding to calls. They're the quality control. They're the ones that help make sure that we can have a budget that's put together and actually, quite honestly, a presentation that is coherent. They're the ones that make a big difference and a big impact that maybe people in the community never see. But we are reducing one of those positions, and that would fall partially under process, which is making sure that our record specialists are getting things where they need to go. For example, when an officer writes a report, it may need to be distributed to the district attorney's office, Department of Human Services, DMV, as just some examples. We're reducing one of those positions. It will have an impact. It'll be a greater workload for those that are in that unit. It could mean a potential decrease in quality control, but we're good at what we do, and we'll endeavor through that. Next slide, please. Assessment. Investigations is really the biggest part of this. We're talking about some of your more in-depth criminal investigations. We have a really strong team of detectives in the police department that have a very, shall I say, deep amount of experience. We're very fortunate. This is what they do. We also do traffic crash analysis, which is a critical part of making sure that we can be aware of what the traffic safety situation is in the city. It's a big, important thing for our community, is traffic safety. So that falls under here as well. And then crime analysis. We actually have a crime analyst that helps to identify where do we want to focus our resources? How do we want to do that? And I mean, it can go from anything the chief's dashboard, which council sees monthly, that myself or one of my command team comes in and presents to them on the stats from the previous month, to helping an officer identify who a suspect is in a case that they're working on, and anything in between. So those are some of the things when we talk about the assessment of the work that we are doing in terms of trying to make sure that we support our team. Next slide. Inquiry. So this is follow-up. This is actually putting things together so that it makes sense, because oftentimes you get a bunch of information in a case, an investigation that somebody's doing, and they need to put it all together into a orderly fashion for that case to be investigated properly. Another thing that it also does that inquiry does is we talk about records and data. So meeting the National Incident-Based Reporting System requirements, NIBRS, that's where every report that we take gets reported, whether it's the state or the federal level or both. This is where you compare Tigard to other communities across the country. It's required. We put a high focus on making sure that it's as accurate as possible. It's, I think, something that this community expects. And it's also a requirement that we have, whether it's through the state or through the federal government. It's the FBI that is effectively the clearinghouse for the national information. Next slide. Enforcement. Many people would think that enforcement's the biggest thing of what we do, but we talked about it being response. This is really getting down to the nitty-gritty of when it actually comes time to go to court, to testify in those cases, to assist in the preparation for a trial. I've watched our detectives work for weeks preparing for complex trials that they're going to testify in, to make sure that they're properly prepared to help the district attorney's office do a proper investigation. So some of the things that you'll see in there would be supporting other outside agencies. And it's not just the ones we have listed up there. So DHS is Department of Human Services, FBI is obvious, ODOT, OLCC. I mean, we could go through the whole alphabet probably talking about all the different places that we help support. It also is something that we work with our neighboring agencies, like the Sheriff's Office, some of our adjoining communities, Tualatin, Sherwood, Beaverton, Lake Oswego, that we all will work together when it comes to some of these types of things. I think another thing that's important to see when you talk about enforcement is the rules are always changing. So each time the legislature meets, there will be new laws that come out of that will impact the work that we do, and it could definitely have impact in the enforcement end of it. This most recent short legislative session absolutely did have that. And I will note this, it is rare, if not, well, I don't know that I've ever seen it actually happen where they actually attached funding to a mandated change that we get. So we get changes to requirements for us just about every year, if not every other year. And I've yet to see funding be attached to one of those mandated changes. It typically comes in the form of additional required training. And that hinges on officer certification. So they're required to get that training, yet the city doesn't get any extra money to do that. So we have to figure out ways to fund that. Next slide, please. Probably should have talked about that under development, because that's one of the things that we do is we really focus on trying to make sure that we train our officers, our detectives, our professional support staff at the very best level we can. When I was talking about using a scalpel in our budget preparation process, this is where we really got focused. I hope we didn't cut too deep, to stick with the scalpel analogy. We talked about some of the required state training, and that doesn't come with supportive funding, but we feel pretty confident that we can do it, that we can maintain that level of training, the quality of training. We have excellent trainers. We continue to try and train our trainers so that we can bring it home. We don't have to send people out. We're focused on saying instead of sending 2 or 3 detectives to this high-level training, we'll send 1, and then they can bring it back and train the other members of the team. The challenge with that is it's never as effective as being there in person. So we're going to give it a try and see if we can make the same level of impact and continue to provide that high level of service. The other thing is, for example, we're an accredited agency. The second one from the bottom there, we're required by the state to be accredited. They did provide some grants for some small agencies, but Tigard doesn't qualify as a small agency, so we get to pay for it ourselves. Not a huge thing, though. We were accredited before it was required to be accredited, so it's become a part of the culture of the agency. And that's just something that we do, we plan for, and we budget for annually. Next slide, please. Partnerships. So in the partnerships, this is where we really try to leverage some value in our general fund, is working with some of those other with some of those other agencies. So the district attorney's office has a grant for an organized retail theft detective, recognizing that we were among the leaders in the state or the region, maybe even the country, in terms of that type of investigation because of our commercial crimes unit. The district attorney came to me and asked if that's something we would be interested in. I said, absolutely we would. What that did is that has transferred the burden off of the general fund for that position, and the district attorney's office is paying for it. We started at April 1st, so not only is it making an impact for next fiscal year, it is also making an impact in the current fiscal year. I removed that. He was on a drug task force with the DEA, so it's a big change. That was a big impact on that task force, but it seemed like a better alignment with our area of expertise, with our commercial crimes unit, and the district attorney's office picking up the tab for that. Additionally, we're working with the school district on our SRO program. We're in negotiations to renegotiate our contract with them. We would increase how much they pay for one of the SROs. And then we also are working with TriMet to see if we can leverage their transit police division. It would do basically the same thing. We'd remove that burden off the general fund, like we talked about with the district attorney's office and the grant that they have. So what does that mean for the people in the community? Well, for the organized retail theft detective, it actually probably means a better level of service in Tigard. For the officers that would be assigned to transit, they wouldn't necessarily be in Tigard, and they wouldn't be responding to calls in Tigard, but it would increase a partnership we have with additional resources should we need it for a larger event, something like that. So we really try to be intentional and focus on where we can leverage those partnerships in the best way we can that will help us to maintain that level of service that this community has come to expect, while also trying to reduce the burden on the general fund. Next slide, please. Outreach. When you think of outreach, you probably are all going to start thinking about community engagement. If you've been to our open house, that's one of those things that would fall under outreach. Some of the members of council have been in our community academy, and that's about part of what our outreach is. But in addition, it's also the community-facing communications that we have, our public information officer, our news releases, our website, our social media, things along those lines. That's that transparency piece where when you're talking about your local police department, you want to be able to have that transparency, to be able to have your questions answered, be able to build trust with your community. So the outreach piece is a big part of that. The other thing too I want to hit really quickly on the bottom there is recruiting. Recruiting engaged and professional employees. It's about getting people that want to be committed to Tigard, and it's about waiting to find the best. We don't rush to hire someone because we have an opening. We're methodical and intentional, making sure we hire the best people to work in this community, because we owe it to those of you that live in this community to have the best police officers, the best professional support staff we can possibly have. And I honestly believe this when I say you can take the men and women in this police department and put them up against any in the country, and they would be able to do among the best. We hire that well. We have very good employees, and recruiting and spending money on recruiting efforts is really important because that's how we get the right people. Next slide, please. So when we talk about what drives what we do, I talked about the public safety levy, so that is a part of what the funding source is for us. It's about $2.5 million in this coming fiscal year, just over 2.5. That pays for 8 patrol officers, a school resource officer, 2 support staff, so 1 record specialist, 1 property and evidence specialist. And then it also helps to provide some training, which is crisis intervention training. It's a very important part of what we do. We respond to a lot of people that are in mental health crisis. And so having a high level of training for all of our officers is really critically important. That's part of what the public safety levy pays for. And every officer will go through it on a periodic basis to make sure that they've got the newest best practice information in terms of that particular training. The public safety levy was renewed, or was originally passed in May of 2020, and then in May of 24 it was renewed. It actually took effect, the renewal took effect July 1st of 25. So we have a few more years left on the levy before we need to revisit that particular one. I talked about regulatory changes. The next one, they're talking about technology. We're really trying to leverage technology to best support the operations that we do, and it's ever-changing. I had gone to the Chiefs Conference a couple of years ago. I came back, I said, boy, if we aren't on the train for some of the technology that's out there in 5 years, it will have left the station. I went last year, the train has left the station. That's how fast technology in this business is developing, and there are going to be some real opportunities in the very near future that we as a city and as a police department will need to look at in order to most effectively serve the community. Aging infrastructure is something that's constantly a concern of ours. We don't need to go into talk about the facility. I will say that we do have high-quality equipment. And that is one of the things that if you talk to our officers, they will nod their heads and say, yeah, we've got good quality equipment. It's important. It's important to focus on that. Next slide. So how do we gauge the work that we do? Well, last year in 2025, we had the highest dispatch calls for service that we've had in our history. I reported to council each month. It was at literally a breakneck pace all year. We also had a really high number of self-initiated calls. Self-initiated is when officers get the opportunity to go out and do proactive work. So they're out making contacts in the community. Could be traffic stops, could be stopping to talk to somebody on the street, could be they observed something as they were going by that didn't look right to them. They stopped to take a look and address that. Our emergency response time is an area that I really feel like we need to try and get better at. It's something we focus on each year. 6 minutes and 46 seconds is a long time. If I were to take 6 minutes and 46 seconds and just sit here in silence to show you what that feels like if you've called 911, it feels like an eternity. We'd like to see that between 5 and 5.5 minutes. I know it's a tall order. My commanders are probably sitting back there with a small smile on their face, because they know that that's a big challenge. The traffic that this community has impacts us even when we're responding to 911 calls. You all sit in it, I sit in it. When I'm driving to or from almost anywhere, even when you're driving with lights and sirens on, it slows you down. So we focus on trying to do that. How we do that is going back to that piece where I talked about like our crime analysts that can help focus us on where we should be at certain times of the day. We track all that, trying to allocate resources to the right part of town at the right time of day, trying to be predictive if we can. Next slide. So trying to look forward. I talked about technology, trying to leverage that when it's right for this community and when we have the opportunities to do it. Looking for additional partnerships and alternative funding sources to make sure that we can try and continue to be mindful of the general fund burden that the police department has. But then doing all of this and maintaining that level of service that this community has come to expect from their police department. All of that helps us to deliver the highest quality police services that we possibly can with the budget that we have. So the last slide, or there you go, that was at Open House last year after we had a wonderful day of open house. That is the men and women of the Tigard Police Department that serve this community so diligently every day. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have about our budget for this coming year.
Thank you, Chief. So we have about 15 minutes reserved for the discussion and question. But the chief went over his presentation by 7 minutes, so we have 8 minutes for questions and discussion. So Anybody have a question or comment? Please, Jeff.
Yeah, hi, and thanks. I had a question about the funding of the organized retail, which I understood is a grant from the DA. And I understand the drive for that. Is that going to be a full-time Tigard employee? Is this like a 1 year? Like, what's the duration of that grant and the kind of the long-term strategy for that position?
Sure. The grant runs through August of next year, and so they already have the grant renewed once. They're in the process of applying for it again. So it obviously is up in the air as to whether or not that'll go beyond August of next year. But so August of 27 is when that'll expire. And it's a pass-through grant, so we invoice the district attorney's office for the cost of the employee, and then they reimburse us.
I have a question. Thank you for all the detailed presentation. So for the process of one reduction, FTE record specialist, I appreciate you mentioned that other member will have greater workload and will step up, and you're concerned about potential decrease in quality control. So I'm just wondering if there are ways to measure that, are we really in trouble? Let's try for a year, or are we going to, how do you determine whether it's not acceptable anymore?
Sure. A good question, Mayor. And so the position is currently vacant.
Mm-hmm.
The way we assess that is whether or not they're able to keep up on the workload that they have.
Okay.
And in working with the record supervisor, the team that's in there, we feel like we can do it.
Okay.
And then assess if they're unable to keep up on the workload, if they start getting work backlogs and we have to start paying overtime just to get the regular daily work done, then we'll know that it's not working.
Okay.
And that's really where that quality control piece comes in, is can they keep up on doing the workload that they have and be able to do it in their regular work schedule? Because we shouldn't be doing regular work that should be predictable in overtime hours. We should be able to do that in regular hours. So that's where that benchmark will be for us.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that, because I was worried they're going to start making lots of mistakes, but that's not what you meant.
Correct.
Okay. And just a comment, I really appreciate you saying that we need to leverage technology, but at the same time, that's, I have a sense that many member of public don't really necessarily trust new technology. So I think that's where the building public trust comes in, right? Just they have to be able to trust you, saying we're going to protect your right when we use this new technology. So that's very important for us in the long run to be able to do more for less by relying on technology. And your comment about aging infrastructure really resonate with me, of course, with new facilities, because it's just for the long term. It's like, okay, I'm going to be on my soapbox. It's just doing nothing right now, not funding new facility right now, doing nothing is costing us money, right? We're just going to be more and more in the hole. So I really appreciate you mentioning that aging infrastructure is really playing a big part in our long-term physical health. So
yes,
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
I had a question, when we get into like the body cam and the technology and what I would call the new service industry life that we're moving into, is there an opportunity to coordinate at a larger police organization scale to sort of use purchase power to drive the cost of this service center? Are we looking into that, and what does that kind of look like or entail?
We actually do. We actually leverage that already. So there's cooperative buying agreements that are available for a wide variety of contracts across, not just in the police department, but citywide. So that's what we actually have the entire Axon contract on, is through a cooperative purchasing agreement. So it means that every agency is going to get the same pricing, and it's the most competitive pricing that we can get.
Every agency, like in the state of Oregon, and like which regional scale are we talking about?
Yeah, it would depend. Anybody that's a part of that cooperative purchasing agreement, so it could be across the nation, really.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I don't know who put first. Aaron, go first.
I had a question about forfeiture expenditures.
Okay.
So I guess first off, where is that money going? What is that being used toward?
Where is it being stored?
No, what is it being used toward?
Well, it's very specifically identified by the Department of Justice and the Department of Treasury what we can use it on. It has to be used specifically for police use. So that's one of the areas that we're going to use for training. So we'll use it for training. We can use it to purchase equipment within certain requirements. So if there's a question about what we may want to spend it on, let's say we need to replace firearms or something, we may be able to use it as long as it doesn't supplant funds that are a part of our regular budget. It would have to be something that is more of like a one-time purchase, something along those lines. We've purchased vehicles with them in the past. So for example, because we assigned the detective to that organized retail theft task force, he's a task force of one right now, but because we assigned him to that team, we could buy a vehicle with asset forfeiture to help him in that role. So it could be a wide variety of things that it could be used for, but it has to be specifically focused on providing support to police operations or training.
Okay. So when I was looking, there's three sections here. There's justice forfeiture, treasury forfeiture, and local forfeiture.
Yes.
So what I was looking at is that the amount of the budget has gone from 2024, the total of those was about 175,000 as far as the expenditures, and it's now about 550,000. Is that covered by what you're bringing in through forfeitures?
Yes.
So that is,
so there's
one for one, basically.
Correct. There's actually a fund balance of about 1.9 million in there right now. 1.7, thank you.
Okay.
See, this is why I have Katie with me. So the balance in that account is currently about 1.7 million. And the DOJ especially doesn't like it to be sitting in there for very long. But yes, there is money that comes into that. And that's something that we look at very carefully to make sure that we're not going to deplete that and try and budget something that we don't have funds for.
Understood. So, but one of the main things is that it can't be used for primary budget. It has to be for one time.
Correct. And it can't be something.
Give and take some rules.
Yeah, and it can't supplant current budget. So I couldn't take something that's funded through the general fund and pay for it now with asset forfeiture. I'd probably go to federal prison for that, so.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Ethan and then Bill, very quickly. We are out of time already, but go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief. Quick question. Earlier in the slide deck, you mentioned year-over-year budget savings in interdepartmental services of 27%. So I was just wondering if you could expand a little bit more on what those interdepartmental services are and how you were able to achieve 27% reduction.
Yeah, so that would be along the lines, and I'd ask Eric to help me on some of this stuff too, but part of that is that moving of the detective off of the general fund to being funded by the district attorney's office. The officers are going to be assigned to transit, and then other changes that were made across between departments in the city itself too. So it's a combination of a variety of things, reducing the burden on the general fund.
Yeah. The other significant impacts is some of the reductions in the central services fund. So you saw some positions being cut in are proposed to be reduced in the central service fund. So that has a trickle down impact to interdepartmental services. Additionally, we did complete a indirect cost allocation plan study this year. And so the results from that study has shown a shift in some of the departments.
All right. Bill, last one.
Just really quickly, you call out specifically in operating budget. Thanks. You specifically call out in the slide that personnel services increased 9%. Can you unpack that just a little bit, what the drivers on that are?
Sure. So a couple of things, primarily the TPOA contract, Tiger Police Officers Association, so the union, and their collective bargaining agreement, there's a couple of contractual salary increases in there. It was last July 1st was 4%, and then January 1st was 6%. And then our sergeants also became represented and went into the union as well. And they had some pretty significant changes to what their compensation package was, and that's almost entirely what drove that 9% increase in the labor cost. Yep.
All right, so we have to move on to the next section. So thank you, Chief and Katie, for your presentation. And if you have any more questions for the police department, please feel free to email Eric and James, and they will get the answer for you. All right, let's move on to the next section, which is the library department presentation of budget. And I will invite our library director, Halstead Bernard, to give the presentation. Good evening.
Good evening, Budget Committee, library teammates, Team Tigard, Tigard community. My name is Halstead Bernard. I'm the director of the Tigard Public Library, and I am here tonight to present the library's fiscal year 2027 budget. Next slide, please. 20 minutes is not enough time to talk about all of the important work that is happening at the library and talk about the budget. So I'll encourage you to watch the recording of the April 21st council meeting at which the library board presented their annual report on library operations. But I will take a moment to acknowledge and share and celebrate our library's vision, which is to be a community hub for knowledge and enrichment where everyone feels welcome. Next slide, please. Pictured on this slide are some of the library employees on opening day of the Express Library. So we operated an Express Library location during the 3-month closure during the HVAC upgrade. We offered story times and other selected programs, reference and readers advisory, circulating materials, access to Wi-Fi and computers, assistance with library accounts. We also provided outreach services to partner events and spaces throughout the community. All of this work in the Express Library and all of the work that the library does in the building, which we are back in now, it supports council goals, specifically Council Goal Strategy 1.2 to support housing in our community while addressing the regional crisis of homelessness. What does this look like at the library? Well, it looks like our library social services coordinator who connects community members with resources to address housing instability. And during our closure, our library social services coordinator continued to do that. Council's Goal Strategy 3.4, providing meaningful community connection through programs, events, and other opportunities. What this looks like is when considering how to offer programs to our community, we choose a variety for all ages and all types of community members. And we did so in our Express location. We do so in our big, beautiful building. We also continue to make progress on our 2021 to 2026 strategic plan in its final year. Part of our strategic planning process was the addition of the library social services coordinator position to meet the growing need in our community for connection to resources to meet basic human needs. We also have incorporated community feedback to embark on a refresh of our second floor, rearranging some of our spaces to better fit the needs of our patrons. And also, no overview would be complete without a note about changes to countywide WCCLS services, including what we're calling the centralization of collection management or collection development. What this means is that WCCLS employees will assume the work of selecting, purchasing, receiving, processing, and cataloging library materials for all member libraries, which is a massive change from how it is currently done in all member libraries. Each of our employees at Tigard involved in this process select, purchase, receive, process, and catalog materials specifically for Tigard community members. I'll share more about the impacts of this change later in my presentation. Next slide, please. So here we have the proposed budget overview. This includes both personnel reductions and materials and services reductions. In the technical services team, 2 vacancies will be eliminated, including a supervisor position and a union-represented senior librarian position. In the reader services division, 2 positions would be reduced by 0.2 FTE each, and the limited duration library social services coordinator position would not be funded. In materials and services reduction, this is a 29.2% reduction to the library materials budget and the corresponding processing budget. This is also a reduction, there is also a reduction in all divisions' travel and training budgets. Next slide, please. What are the changes from the current fiscal year? Our personnel services with this reductions would decrease by 6%. Our materials and services would decrease by 24%, and that is by that 29.2% reduction in the book budget and the proportionate processing charges. And the interdepartmental services, which the chief just spoke on, would decrease by 35%, not only by the way that the internal service costs are calculated, but by having fewer positions, fewer FTE. We also want to take a moment to talk about the resources that the library provides, the revenue, including the Washington County Replacement Library Levy that passed in November, which increases the library's allocation by 5%. That's over $4.5 million. And I just want to take a note that library operations are funded both by the city and by the county. In the current fiscal year, approximately 43% of that is funded by the county. With the proposed reductions, that would be a change of Washington County the levy and the general fund would be funding 56% of our operating costs. So when we're talking about the county funding, about half of the current 43% comes from revenue from a local option levy, which is the one that was passed in November, and the other half from the county's general fund, as I've noted. Additionally, our Friends of the Library organization funds 70% of our enrichment programming costs, which is approximately $17,000 each year. And our volunteers, with which we would not be able to run our library, contributed nearly 6,000 hours of their time in 2025, which is an equal about 2.87 FTE, or a value of $217,600. Next slide, please. So here are the programmatic areas we developed in this budgeting process. Although the library's teams are grouped by divisions, our work is not divided cleanly by these lines. These programmatic areas then that we devised best reflect the work being done throughout our entire library. I'll talk about the key services and activities for each of these programs, and I'll talk about the corresponding performance measures and how the proposed reductions will impact our service levels. But because of our limited time tonight, I will not be sharing each number for each performance measure listed. I'm happy to answer questions at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. Our first program is library materials. When we think of library materials, this is when we were talking about centralized collections. Currently, decentralized collections development is in our library materials area, selecting and withdrawing materials. We're ordering, processing, receiving, and cataloging new materials, and we're also processing returns, so things that are checked out and they come back in and they need to get back on the shelf in the right place. Our performance measures include our annual circulation, which is increasing, our number of items added to the collection, which will decrease with these proposed reductions, and number of days to process and catalog new items, which will also decrease. We're looking at the reduction impacts on these service levels to be significant. The library proposed that 29.2% reduction in the library materials budget and the processing budget proportional as part of a glide path towards the centralized collections model that will take place in July of 2027. And this new model will purchase and process significantly fewer materials locally, as the model is based on one of efficiency of scale. So when we purchase fewer materials, we will have less access to books and other materials, especially when we are in this transitional time. We don't know how much of this work will still need to be done locally. Additionally, as part of the glide path to centralized collections, we are anticipating layoffs in fiscal year 28. And managing this transition through attrition, through those two vacancies in tech services, which will result in lengthier times for patrons to wait for new materials. Next slide, please. In the community spaces programmatic area, our person in charge team supports the appropriate use of spaces during library service hours. Additionally, library users can access a variety of spaces in our 48,000 square foot building, including the Children's Room, Hewitt Room, Teen Scene, Local History Room, Houghton Room, as well as 3 reservable study rooms and the recently refurbished and reservable Technology Room. And our admin team ensures that our policies and procedures that impact both those who work in the library and those who visit are reviewed, updated, and approved by our library board. Performance measures in this area include our study room usage, which continues to increase, patron visits, which also are increasing, although there was a dip, of course, while the library building was closed. And those are the two performance measures. The reduction impacts for this area would be 3 fewer members of our person in charge or PIC team. That means there will be a smaller group of people to respond to challenging incidents. These incidents are ones that we de-escalate and handle before we even have to call our PD team. And so with less PIC capacity, we will have a smaller group of people to do that work. Also, the PIC team will no longer have the specialized support from the library social services coordinator. Next slide, please. In the enrichment events area, we offer a range of engaging educational opportunities that center our community, like story times for babies and caregivers, workshops for seniors, culturally responsive events for everyone in between. Some examples include puzzle, plant, and craft supply swaps, workshops for financial wellness, Medicare, and disaster preparedness, and presentations about celebrating and conserving our natural world. Our performance measures include library program sessions and attendance, which continues to increase. Our items added to the collection, which will be a significant decrease. And, oops, I flipped the wrong page. Sorry about that. And summer reading program participants. And then our AARP tax help attendees. Last fiscal year, we had over 1,000 tax forms filed as part of that AARP tax help. Unfortunately, we were not open during the bulk of the tax season this year, but next year we're going to get over that 1,000 mark again. The reduction impacts on the service levels in our enrichment events area include with the FTE reduction for our teen librarian programs for teens will be reduced. Also, with the FTE reduction for adult services librarian, one-on-one job help, and other programs for adults will be reduced. Next slide, please. For community engagement and outreach area, we provide meaningful opportunities to support library activities through our volunteer program. We engage with community members at schools, community partner locations, and events across the city, sharing resources and providing off-site services. And our library social services coordinator provides our community members with connections to local resources and community partners that support meeting basic human needs such as housing and food. Our performance measures for this area include volunteer hours, outreach sessions and attendance, and social services referral and support interactions. I will note that beginning in December 2024, when Rin was hired to this position, just in that last fiscal year of 2025, there were 239 interactions. Current fiscal year estimated is 1,400 interactions. And the next fiscal year target, we will not have target interactions. For that fiscal year, the work will no longer be done at our library because we will lose the specialized training and abilities of this role. 2 years ago, we created this position to meet a growing need in our community. People were coming to the library to ask us for help because they couldn't get food or clothing or public benefits or education or housing or mental health services. And we listened to that need and we created this position. So since Rin joined us, they have had over 125 interactions on average with community members each month. That number has grown each month. They also created our Basic Needs bookshelf, which offers library visitors access to basic need items like water, snacks, menstrual products, socks, hygiene items, and more. and stocked entirely by community donations. And in 2025, WRIN helped to supply community members with 2,879 basic needs bookshelf items. WRIN also works with other city departments and community agencies like Just Compassion, and helps to support a welcoming and safe environment in our library as a member of our PIC team. With the elimination of this position, the need in our community will continue to grow, and we will not be able to meet it. This unmet need shifts the burdens to librarians and library workers, and it also shifts the burden to all of our coworkers across the city who work directly with the public. Next slide, please. Our next programmatic area is technology, in which we offer publicly accessible computers, printing, Wi-Fi, one-on-one tech help, and even a fax machine. Our performance measures in this area include hours of public computer use and also the number of attendees at one-on-one tech help sessions. And currently, no changes to this area are proposed. Next slide, please. In the reference and readers advisory area, this is the program area that involves knowledgeable, well-trained library staff that assist patrons with their information needs and connects patrons with the reading, viewing, and listening materials they want and need. And with this program, we support an informed community. The performance measure in this area is reference desk service interactions. The budgetary impacts to this service level, we aimed to avoid decreasing the number of service hours and the number of open hours to the public. So we will remain open to the public 64 hours a week and all 7 days. However, reference desk staff will have a higher workload of regularly scheduled weekly desk hours, and there will be a reduced ability to cover unexpected absences. We'll rely more heavily on our on-call librarian pool to cover absences without an increase to the on-call librarian budget. And desks may need to close more often, and in extreme circumstances, the second floor entirely may need to close early if there is not enough staff to cover the adult reference desk. We're already experiencing the impacts of unplanned absences on our children's desk. Since 2022, we've had to close the children's desk for a total of 46.5 hours due to unplanned absences and lack of last-minute coverage. Next slide, please. Our last program area is library account support. We assist the library visitors with their account needs, and we help them to access their materials. Our performance measures in this area include the number of new library cards we issue, the number of total number of patrons checking out at the checkout desk, and the number of phone calls answered by staff. Yes, we do answer our phone live. No changes to this support, to library account support, are proposed for next fiscal year. So next slide, please. So now that I've shared our current state and the impact of proposed reductions to library services in the library team, I'd like to take a moment to talk about what I observe as longer-term opportunities and liabilities. While there is no question that our library serves as a crucial place for information access and enrichment programs, we are also offering critical civic services like voter information, tax help, language conversational groups, technology access, and so much more. Our building itself provides respite from an ever-changing climate. We've expanded our identity in our community. We're no longer simply a repository for information, but a layer of invisible infrastructure that connects cross-sections of our community in innovative ways. During times of economic uncertainty, as James noted earlier, in the budget forecast, our library is relied upon to provide access to resources that individuals cannot afford on their own. This is true of books and items in our library of things. It's true of electronic resources made possible by our membership in WCCLS. It's true of water and a snack when somebody needs it the most. It's also true of our freely accessible computers and Wi-Fi as we help close the digital divide in our community. And access to public spaces that enable both solitude and connection, like the variety of spaces inside our library, are proven to combat long-term social isolation and improve both physical and emotional well-being. But there can be a cost to the increased reliance on our public spaces. Burnout and compassion fatigue are on the rise since 2020. The People Lab at Harvard Kennedy School conducted a large-scale survey among 3,341 public servants during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Their findings showed that 1 in 3 were experiencing burnout, and 1 in 5 were experiencing compassion fatigue. So why should we care about this other than having basic human empathy for our coworkers? Well, we care because both burnout and compassion fatigue are associated with significant health challenges and high rates of absenteeism and turnover. These two have budgetary impacts to our library and our entire city, both in covering unplanned absences, as I mentioned earlier, and in having to rehire and retrain for positions more frequently. In addition to burnout and morale impacts for our team, we're relying on our volunteers for key workflows. We have enjoyed a robust volunteer program for many years, but if that were to change, losing volunteer hours while also reducing FTE would directly impact our current service level. In addition to these emerging budgetary concerns, we have the centralized collection management project on the horizon. This changeover is projected to take place in July 2027, just over a year from now, and yet we still do not have concrete information about how much of the work will be centralized and how much of the work we will still need to complete locally. Due to the anticipated change in workload, several of our tech services team members have retired or taken other positions, resulting in a small team of experts who have no additional capacity to absorb more workload should another team member choose to leave. Next slide, please. Now that I have shared the impact of our proposed budget reductions on our service levels, I've also shared some trends and potential liabilities, I will close by addressing the potential for additional trade-offs that might close the city's fiscal gap long-term. With the proposed reductions I've already discussed in tonight's presentation, the library will be at the lowest number of FTE we have had in over 10 years, since fiscal year 2015. That means that any additional cuts to our personnel will immediately result in closing the library at least 1 day a week, perhaps 2, and cutting programs and outreach. We have nothing significant left in our materials and services to cut, other than further reducing our library materials budget, which would mean purchasing even fewer books and materials than in this last year of decentralized collection management. And considering the replacement levy that passed last November, further cuts to what is proposed here would directly impact the services that the levy intended to fund. That's all I have for you tonight. Thank you for your time. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Council President Wolf.
Director Bernard, thank you. And just quickly, thank you for your advocacy. And I just want to also thank your teammates and your community that showed up to advocate on the library's behalf. So my question quickly, you started out when we talked about council goals, the regional crisis that we all are facing. My question is, do you know a position like the library social service coordinator? Is that something that is consistent across other cities in Washington County? Is that a unique position to us? And just curious about that. Thank you.
I'd be happy to speak to that. One of the predominant reasons why we decided to try and meet this rising need with a social services coordinator position is I had the good fortune to work with the first ever social worker hired in this country at the San Francisco Public Library. Her name is Leah Esquera. She's still there and she's amazing, and she completely changed my whole world about how I thought about libraries and our role in society. And we are not alone. There are many libraries in this country that have social workers. Sometimes they have peer navigators. Sometimes they have social services coordinators like ours. In WCCLS, we are the only library to have this position. Other libraries have been more successful in partnering with their local community partners to bring someone in on a regular basis. We tried for many years and have, long before I started here, tried to partner with our community partners who did not have the capacity to meet the need that we were seeing at our library.
I think next is Aaron.
Thank you very much for everything that you shared. I will say, first off, there were a lot of numbers, so I apologize if you already answered this and I just missed it. First off, I'm very excited to hear that the library will be able to stay open. There is definitely concern amongst a number of people, as exhibited from who came and who was here and has already left, about the reductions. My question, though, is specifically about the personnel reductions. On here, it's 3.4 FTE. 2 of those were already vacant. If we were just to look at the cost of the ones that are active that are being reduced, either the 0.2s or the full FTE loss for the social services coordinator, do you have an estimated cost of what that would be in total terms? If we were to able to drop it back in the budget, how much would that cost?
I don't have that, but I could get that for you.
Thank you.
Councilor Robbins.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Alsted. I think we all love the library. I wanted to go back to one of the numbers, just because, again, there was a lot of numbers. I wrote down 43% county to 56%. Is that the amount that the county is giving us, or the amount that the levy is covering of the money county is giving us?
So for our current fiscal year budget, the county funding that we receive is 43% of the library's operating costs. With the proposed reductions and the 5% increase in funding that we'll receive from the county, that changes to 56% funded by the county.
Okay, thank you. So did the part of the county money that's coming from the general fund, did that remain about the same?
That is an excellent question. I'm going to look to Eric Kang to answer.
So one thing I'd clarify on that is that the interdepartmental charges are also going down. And so that's why there's a bit of a higher inverse flip from the 43 to the 56%. So the way our funding mechanism works for the library is that the general fund will essentially fund whatever the county does not fund. So it's not a specific transfer that happens to fund library services. It's essentially we spend county money first, and then whatever's remaining just comes out of the general fund to pay for the rest.
Thank you. My question was, we get money from the county kind of from 2 separate sources. One, the levy, and 2, the other money that the county gives us from the county general fund.
True.
And I'm wondering if that money from the county general fund is similar.
I see what you're saying now. I'll say if you have the answer on top of your head.
I will say that in our current fiscal year, half of our county funding comes from the levy and half comes from the county general fund. The reason why we're having a little bit of a how does this work is that we are drafting new intergovernmental agreements currently that have the funding model in them, and we're having a meeting this Friday to talk about some of those last details. So I can give you more information at the next budget meeting.
That sounds great. One last question is, I am concerned about the reduced PIC capacity with the increase that we are seeing with overall usage in the library, the increase in some of our houseless neighbors who are near the library with Just Compassion and camping, and just general aggressiveness that we're seeing among everyone right now. I am wondering, is there any possibility, or have we already looked into any sort of grant funding, either through the county or the state, to fund the social services coordinator, particularly since some of the usage of that position is coming from people who are sent here from other parts of the county to access Just Compassion?
So I don't know how grant funding would work for a position. I'm going to actually look to Eric to if that would be a possibility, but that would not be a possibility for July 1st.
from a timing standpoint, some of these grants take quite a bit of prospecting, and as you're keenly aware, from the county funding is limited. However, I believe we have explored some of the avenues before. I can't recall the specifics around it, but from my recollection, particularly around the county and the state funding, I mean, there are funding constraints just regionally. So I would think it'd be a challenge. But again, I think from a timing perspective, that would probably be the hardest one to overcome.
Okay, Yusuf.
Thank you, Library Director Bernard. My question comes from the community engagement and outreach side. There's a performance measure on social services referrals and the reduction impacts that would have on that. Could you clarify, or if you have some kind of since it's a performance measure, is there some kind of like a reporting mechanism, or I guess I'm trying to get at the number of people that are getting referred out of there?
Yes, 1,400 people, in fact. Some of that was shared in public comment. I shared it in my presentation that those numbers of interactions per year, that's all RIN's work. That is RIN connecting people directly with resources or other community partners. Are there other statistics you'd like me to share at the next budget meeting, or?
No, I was just curious on that one specifically. It gives us an idea of how many of those referrals are going through there. Thank you.
Ethan.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Director Bernard. Thank you for being here. Clearly in a very tough position, so that's certainly not lost on me. And I want to extend that appreciation to everyone else, like Council President Wolf mentioned as well, for being here on a Monday night. I personally feel troubled that not everyone was able to speak, and that especially goes for the teenagers. I'm not sure if they're still here, but again, thanks for being here. I would invite you to return again to continue the commentary. And one specific ask I know I would have is, you see the challenges the city's facing, budgetary challenges. I think one way to help us help you could really be to provide as specific recommendations as possible, not only about what you would like to see continue to be funding at the library, obviously, but also where else could we cut then? And I know that's not necessarily your job, but again, to help us help you, I think the more specifics, the better. And maybe those would be better suited for written comments. But I do have a question as well. You mentioned at the beginning the changes to the countywide WCCLS services around centralization of collection development. Is there a financial impact to that, either cost or benefit?
Yeah, so one of the reasons why the centralization model went forward is that when I was talking about the efficiency of scale, so the difference between all of the member libraries each ordering their own copies of certain items versus centralized one group of WCCLS employees ordering more copies and sending them out to the different locations. That early in our funding and governance process, which has been the past few years that I've been a part of, that was determined as the cost saver for the county. And that was pursued as a cost saver, and the Board of County Commissioners approved that change to the funding model to account for centralized collections.
Do you know how much cost saved there?
I know that there were conversations around certain numbers, but the cost comes from the number of personnel through the entire cooperative that are actually doing the work at the different libraries, and then being able to reduce the number of positions that were doing that work. As you have seen tonight, personnel costs are a significant amount of any cost for a municipality, and Eric has his hand up.
I could actually speak to that. So the ballpark estimate that we're working around for local cost is about $750,000 to $1 million annually. But there's a greater cost if you're talking about system-wide across all member libraries.
That's helpful, thank you. Yeah. I have another question, but I'll come back to that if we have time at the end, because I know others do too.
Yeah, we have 3 minutes, so Councilor Schlack.
Thank you, and I think my question is better served for a written comment. I was just looking through the library budget year over year. It looks like in fiscal year 24, the actual budget was 8.2 million. In fiscal year 25, it was 9.5 million. The revised budget for fiscal year 26 was 10 million, and then the proposed budget for next year is 8 million. So we can see over the last couple of fiscal years, we went from about where we're being proposed now. We went up to 10 million, and now we're cutting back down to where it was. So I would just like sort of more in a narrative format, less of a spreadsheet format, to understand what the drivers were from that period to now, so we can just sort of understand those changes. That would help me out, and I think that's a written comment or written response. And then I'd like to say I'm also, the problem with being on budget committee long enough is you see the exciting announcements of new programs like social services coordinator or the community-oriented policing program, mental health response team programs, and so on. And then you get, tough budget years like this where you can see them getting proposed to be removed. So I think it's disappointing to see that that's on the table, especially considering the council goals that we have. Thank you.
Jeff, last question.
Kind of consolidated purchasing and because you had said something like reduced, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it was almost like we're going to have reduced services in terms of available books, to put it in context. And I'm wondering, is there a projection, like, are we changing in Washington County the total number of books? Are we changing our opportunity to select the books we want, or do we know how much we're giving up with this shift? Because I can go online now and order inter-office. Sometimes you guys ship it from Atlanta, right? I don't, And so for me, I'm wondering, like, or is it just the shelving kind of facing books of what's available for the browsing? Like, what do we see as the impact on accessibility of content, like quantity of content?
You are asking exactly the questions we would want you to ask about centralization. We have voiced our concerns in all of these conversations about losing that local ability to purchase and select for our community versus that being done at the county in Hillsborough, and then those books being sent to us. I will say that there is nothing in the proposed model so far that would mean that we would get fewer books fiscal year 28 and forward. It's just when we're talking about reducing our local collection budget now, when we're still in the decentralized model, we will be able to purchase fewer books, period. The intent is not to decrease overall with the centralization.
Okay. And it is, when this translates to the, like the electronic services, I forget the name of it now, but the service that you guys offer, we can get the free movies online, right? The kids love it.
Canopy.
Canopy. Yes. Is there a savings in that when you scale up to the Washington County level, or is that, like, because to me, that's a significant cost and a great service. But it seems like the scalability of that should work out somewhere. I don't know if it's true.
I would love if that were somewhere we could save costs. Currently, WCCLS pays for Canopy and Libby, Overdrive, and almost all of our electronic resources. So that efficiency of scale is already happening.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Ethan, do you have any quick questions?
I was just wondering if you could speak a little more about volunteers and what you assess the capacity to be to tap more into a volunteer network.
So I will never forget my first budget cycle. I probably have told this story too many times now, but the then budget committee chair asked me, what happens when you have fewer and fewer volunteers? How are you able to serve the community in the same way? And I said, we're not. I was caught quite flat-footed, and I wish I had a much more eloquent response than the one that I gave, but it is still true. We're not. So if we have significant changes to our volunteer force, then we will have changes to our service level. That might include open hours. It might include people will wait longer for books to be reshelved back on the shelf for them to pick up. Holds might take longer to pick up. There's so many things that our volunteers do. Our native landscaping will look sadder. There's so many things, but that is one of the liabilities when we're replacing workforce with volunteer force. We are dependent on them for key workflows.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, let's move on to Parks and Recreation presentation of budget. And we have Ruth Gruen, Parks, Recreation, and Green Infrastructure Manager. And we are about 30 minutes behind, so I appreciate you if you stick it to 20 minutes. Thank you.
All right, we'll speed up. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council and Budget Committee. My name is Rick Gruen. I'm Parks, Recreation, and Green Infrastructure Manager for the city. I'll start out by talking just briefly, and then Joe Barrett is here with me. He's our Public Works Business Manager, and we'll tag team on the presentation. Tigard's strategic vision is an equitable community that is walkable, healthy, and accessible for everyone. I think you all know that. Our high-quality parks and trails are front and center in helping to activate this vision. Our staff of dedicated parks and recreation professionals make it possible to deliver these core services of park maintenance and recreation programming. Joe Barrett will provide an overview of our proposed Parks and Rec budget for fiscal year 27, and we'll share some challenges and pressures facing our Parks and Recreation system. Thank you. Joe?
Good evening. Next slide, please. What you'll see on this slide is our Parks Division budget. Again, we're here as the Public Works Department presenting just two of our divisions, Parks and Rec and the Parks Utility Fund. For FY27, we are seeing Parks Maintenance budget showing just under a 2% growth off of last year's budget, and that is a just over 2% reduction from the FY25 budget as well. Metrics that we currently use in the division include playground safety, making sure that 100% of all of our playground structures meet national standards for safety, meeting the National Community Survey that we talked about earlier in the evening. And right now, we are seeing a 78% community rating the quality of our city's parks and recreation programs as either excellent or good. And then walkability, this speaks in somewhat larger to our capital need, but as well as the operational needs to maintain them. And that is we are meeting roughly 60% of our community can commute to a park, a developed park, within 10 minutes. Next slide, please. I will turn it back over to Rick for how we're striving towards council goals with this budget.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Goal 3, cultivate Tigard as a great place to live, work, and play. Under strategy 3.1, provide to maintain natural areas and recreation facilities, our parks and plazas, as well as opportunities that enhance the health and well-being of the community. How we do this is we are constantly reinvesting in our park infrastructure. This was spelled out in our 2022 park system plan, so that all the people who come to our parks feel safe and it's accessible. Two of these examples are replacing aging infrastructure. Playgrounds in particular age out after some of these older ones, old wooden structures. So we're currently in process of replacing the playground at Bonita Park and also at Woodard Park. Hopefully you've all experienced the new, now almost 2 years old, inclusive playground at Cook Park. And later this summer, we'll be constructing an accessible dock down at Cook Park. So not only is it replacing aging infrastructure, but as we're transitioning our older infrastructure, we're looking at how do we make it more inclusive and more accessible for all community members to enjoy. We're also looking, as spelled out in our Parks and Rec system plan, there's a number of gap areas of the city that do not meet the 10-minute walk. This summer, we'll start construction on Steve Street Park, and in 2 years, it's been deferred because of a clean water service project on the same footprint of Baggin Park. That'll be planned for fiscal year 28. So these will now bring 2 new parks into the community that currently is not served. Under strategy 3.3, broaden and strengthen community safety and resiliency, We're meeting this, we're working on a concept right now that we call it the Resiliency Hub Pilot Project. This will activate, we have 4 CERT areas in the city. So working with our emergency management team in cooperation with Parks, this would locate a covered pavilion in each of these emergency response areas that day in and day out would be activated for recreation until it's activated by our emergency operations center that then our CERT teams would take on maintaining or activating the spaces to support the community in that disaster. The other thing we debuted last year and continue this year is our Ranger program. This has been very beneficial, not just for our parks, but in close cooperation with our police department, is to have a presence in our parks and in our trails to be able to be that liaison between parks and police. So this will be the second year where we have the seasonal ranger. This is a seasonal position. 3.4, providing meaningful community connection through programs, events, and other opportunities. As part of meeting our level of service standard as we work through asset management is to maintain clean and safe public spaces for the public to enjoy and recreate, as well as programming and events that take place in our parks. And the last goal, deliver resilient, sustainable, and well-maintained facilities that provide reliable and efficient services in our community. I think it was mentioned earlier how we transitioned to Tyler and in our Public Works Department. We're focused on asset management. We have a very clear understanding and awareness of what the level of service need is to maintain our 608 acres of our park system, from highly developed parks like a Cook Park to many of our greenway parks or where our trails go through. So this helps to get that high response from the National Community Survey to meet that public expectation. Excuse me, next slide.
So switching from parks maintenance over to our recreation division, again, this is the makeup of the proposed FY27 budget. There is a slight error on the slide. We found earlier in the meeting that there is a duplicate position. The actual numbers are showing a 2.4% growth off of the FY26 numbers and a 14% growth off of the 25 numbers. So those numbers are a little inflated that you're looking at. Metrics that we include in this division are attendance. Recreation, events and classes are attracting over 9,000 attendees each year. Scholarships, last year our recreation division was able to award over $8,000 in scholarships to 23 families or 40 individuals. And participant satisfaction, we present a survey after every event to attendees that are willing to fill it out, and we see that 96% agree that, or strongly agree that they were satisfied with the event. Next slide, please.
So on the meeting our council goal 3, cultivate Tigard as a great place to live, work, and play. Looking at the health and wellness, not just of being in the park and being active, but it's the programming that we do. A couple of examples of our programming is we started up about 2 years ago with a health and wellness fair, which has been very popular. And then at our Dirksen Education Center, summer camps are hugely popular in the city, and a variety of offerings in those camps, focusing on everything from just being outside to river trips to exploring nature in the parks. The second one is provide meaningful community connection through programs, events, and other opportunities. I don't know that it's been mentioned yet. We have an extraordinary staff of 3 in our rec division. These folks, we have a rec coordinator, a program specialist, and an admin assistant who also provides some programming. But these 3 are mighty and deliver a variety of programming from toddlers through teens to seniors. Some of the examples that you see up there on the toddler side, Babies and Me, Wiggles and Giggles are some of the programs. A Teen Night Out is very popular with the high school. And then seniors, as an example, is Fun Over 50 and some senior yoga. And of course, you've all probably been to Cook Park and concerts in the park or movies in the park at some of our different parks around the city. And then at Universal Plaza, we started last year, Music's at the Plaza on Thursday evenings. So these are a variety of the type of program offerings that our staff of 3 do an amazing job. And a lot of the way they deliver it is also through partnerships. Next slide.
So we wanted to also present some of the challenges facing our Parks and Rec group, and we need to start and largely with growth in the system. We have, as Rick said earlier, 608 acres that we are at a level of service we can barely maintain with the resources that we have, and we'll get to that a little bit more. But we do have upcoming areas in River Terrace 2.0, which is looking to bring in roughly 60 additional acres, and the Triangle Cinema Park, which will bring in another 3 of a level 1+ park. On the red, you'll see on the slide, this is going to bring its own set of challenges from a revenue perspective. Just because we bring in new residents, new houses, doesn't mean the Park and Rec fee is keeping up with the cost of our services that we're providing. Next slide, please. This slide shows the growth of the main revenue streams in the Park and Rec division and fund over the last 6 years. In purple, you can see that that's the growth in the Parks and Rec fee, which grows at an average of 4.26% every year. In the green, that is the general fund contribution that has ranged anywhere from $2.6 million to a $1 million drop in '25, now at a $2.1 million contribution. Gray bar is the fees that the citizens are paying to attend events throughout the city. The dramatic thing we hope you take away from this is it's not the fees or the shelter reservations that are really making up the support for our Parks and Rec events. It is the PARF and it is the general fund. Next slide, please. This is another way to look at the forecast for the Parks Utility Fund over the next 5 years. The green bar that you see is an operating reserve. That's the 3-month minimum operating reserve in the fund. We aren't at that now. And the gray bar is the overall fund balance in the fund, which is projected to dip below 0 in the first part of FY28. There is an urgent need of about $1.1 million additional revenue in the Parks Utility system to maintain current services. Next slide, please. So again, we're facing a roughly $1.1 million annual revenue deficit to support Parks and Rec, either in the PARF, the general fund, or another revenue stream. These services were identified by nearly 80% of the community as essential and core. That it has 608 acres in our park system, and our level of service has a demand of 20 FTE. We meet that with 14 full-time FTE, and our seasonals, which account to roughly half each individual, so 12 seasonals equals 6 FTE to get to the 20. Blueberry Hill and Little Bear Park are new out in River Terrace 1.0 that will be coming into the system this year, adding to that acreage. Next slide, please. If the additional revenues that we are facing are not allocated in the next budget or 2, we're facing roughly a 40% reduction in the services we provide in Parks and Recreation. Some of the reductions we would be looking to make in the near future would be special events and shelter reservations, reduced level of service across our parks system, whether it be in restroom, garbage removal, any of those. Elimination of reactive and periodic maintenance of our trails. Our trail system is something we'll get into later, but right now we are roughly using 2 FTE in our park system to be reactive and provide periodic maintenance of those trail systems. And we'd be facing a reduction in our overall rec programming. None of that is before council tonight, or the budget committee tonight. We just thought you should understand what the forecast is looking like for our Parks and Recs division. And with that, I think we're ready for any questions you may have.
Thank you. Councilperson Wolf?
You both very much. Just as a quick refresher on just trying to understand the general fund flow, because it seemed relatively stable and then had a big dip and then kind of back up. And I know it's still a huge concern. So just to remind me what happened in that dip, and is that something unique, or anyway, just a refresher would be great. Thanks, Chair.
So it has always fluctuated somewhere between 2.5 to 2.6 million, and then facing general fund issues that it was having in 25 and with some fund balance, the decision was made to lower that contribution to $1 million, and it has now rebounded back up to 2.1. I can turn to Director Kang for any further details he may have on that.
Yeah, so that one-time dip in the general fund contribution was intentional at fiscal year 25 to close a gap we were saying in the general fund. And so that was, again, was intentional at the time, but as you can see, from a long-term funding standpoint, that has caused some difficulties.
Yes, and I think I was looking for that. It was a intentional one-year step. So thank you for the walk down memory lane. So thank you.
Bill?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for all the work that you do. I had a question about how PARF is funded or assessed on a household basis, specifically with reference to, say, landlords. So if you have renters in, is it on a per unit basis? How is that handled?
For single-family residential, it's on just a per household rate. It's a flat monthly fee to that household per month.
What about say, a landlord? If you have 50 apartments, are they assessed on each unit?
I'd have to go jog my memory and we can get you that information specifically, but yes, I believe multifamily is also charged at the same rate. Commercial, different. Multifamily, same thing. It's on a per unit basis.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilor Robbins?
Thank you. I was wondering, and this might be drastic, but just I'm wondering, when we talked about Goal 3, cultivate Tigers, great place to work, live, and play, reinvesting in park infrastructure and building new parks. What if we pause that for a year? What if we just didn't start those 2 new parks?
So,
which I realize that this is years in the making, but.
So as we look at our inventory of parks, so the Steve Street Park and Baggin Park has been undeveloped but in our system for a while. As we calculate the system demand, so this is regardless of budget, what does it take to maintain our parks? And we have 4 categories of parks. Category 1, which is highly developed, highly improved, so that's Cook Park. Those are our new neighborhood parks. 2s are similar but slightly less developed, less improved. Maybe a park lacks irrigation. So we can count. So as the system grows, or as new parkland, we kind of figure out how that system demand changes. So the short answer, Councilor Robbins, is we've already accounted for the FTE requirement for Steve Street and Baggin. So we have that capacity. Where we kind of run afoul is new parks that are proposed, like River Terrace 2.0. The parks in the southern half of River Terrace 1, Blueberry down, those are outside of that inventory. So that's, if we're gonna slow down anything, it would be those parks, not the Steve Street or Baggin.
I was referring to the capital investment of building these new parks or
I got you.
purchasing
I'm
a
sorry.
new playground. What would happen if we pause that for a year or 6 months or?
Okay, I'll let Joe answer.
So
that.
really the issue we're going to have on that one is capital funding versus operational funding. Using our parks SDC dollars for capital isn't where our issue's lying right now. We have an issue on our maintenance, which is taking into account the Parks Utility Fund. So pausing capital, our infrastructure will get older and it might cost later more down the road for a capital need, but it's not going to do anything to help us with our operational deficit that we're facing.
And just final clarification, I'm guessing that legally we cannot transfer funds from one to the other, correct?
Our current code does not allow for the parks utility fee to be used for any capital. We could do major maintenance out of our parks SDC, that'd be replacing that playground that you're talking about. That's about the only operational touch our SDCs could do.
If I could maybe comment, because I think one of the questions I heard is whether or not development of new parks would also cause further strain to operations. And I think that is a true statement. So whenever you build new parks, that does add more strain.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you so much for the presentation. Up on the slide says elimination of special events and shelter reservations. Is the shelter reservations, 'cause they're built, most of them. Is it a staffing issue? Because I assume most of it's based on efficiency through technology now. So why in particular would that be reduced? Because I can see our community that impacting them greatly.
Right. So where this is with a reserve shelter, our community members are paying a fee to reserve a shelter. Otherwise, the shelters are drop-in, and there's no fee for that. So there's an expectation between shelter reservations that our staff would come in and maintain those and clean them up, or make sure that the user was cleaning up as well, because there's a deposit. Most of our shelter reservation services are evenings and weekends, and the majority of the coverage is by our seasonal staff. So as Joe mentioned in the prior slide, we're budgeted for 12 FTE, 12 seasonals. They're mostly doing the evening coverage and weekend coverage. Our full-times are predominantly Monday through Friday. So if we're going to see any reduction of funding for parks maintenance, the first line would be we would have to lose our seasonal staff. And so that would limit our ability to maintain the shelters.
Councillor Schlack.
Thank you. So comment and a question. Comment, as part of council, we've started a discussion about parks funding related to the Parks and Recreation fee, other fees and charges. So this is obviously going to be an ongoing conversation beyond this budget cycle, and I look forward to finding some long-term solutions there. Regarding the discussion slide, because I feel like we're in discussion at this point, there's a question about any amendments that the Budget Committee wants to consider. And so I just wanted to understand from staff perspective what options are on the table there for us to consider.
You specifically refer to parks funding for amendments? Just for clarification, please.
Yes, if we go to the next slide, since we're kind of in the discussion section already, are there any amendments that the Budget Committee wants to consider, which is, related to that? I guess I'm just curious what options would be on the table for the Budget Committee to consider that is separate from that longer-term council discussion that we will be having.
Yeah, I mean, in the short term for consideration for parks funding, the things that what I would bring to the table on that is using reserve fund balances as a short-term solution. One thing that I will note from a recent event during the supplemental budget, there was some one-time funding sources that were identified, so that could be a consideration for a short-term stopgap until a further long-term solution is determined, as that is a consideration that I know council is engaging in.
Okay, Jeff?
First of all, thank you for what you guys do. I'm going to look forward to the movies in the park again. I had a question on the resilience of the shelter resilience program, these 4 shelters, and I'm wondering if you tie it into like disaster preparedness, you got to link it into like water supply and power, and I'm wondering the scope of this and what sort of coordination is happening with Clean Water Services, PGE, to have a resilient shack, for lack of a better word, right? There's a lot more to it than building the stand-up.
Yeah, we actually have an agenda item set up for council on July 7th to actually go through the concept. So we're a little premature, but Jeff, yes, some of the looking at next to each of the pavilions, and imagine like a 60 by 80, space where day in, day out, kids can play in undercover. Next to it, consider like a Connex box or shipping container. Within that box, there would be generators, there would be a water filtration system. So based on the siting, that would, if it's by a water body, there's a portable water filtration system that could go in, or it can tap into, hydrant, or there's solar power. So this is all, conceptual right now as we work through with our emergency management folks. And also, I think there's been discussion with some of like the Water Advisory Board and how to, integrate, cities of Durham, or if there's interest, or King City in the water districts. So very premature at this point, but we just wanted to put up there as this on the presentation. As we're looking towards resiliency, this might be a solution to bring the Emergency Operations Center from Public Works Building out into the area where it's critically needed.
Yeah, I remember some time back being discussion, the city is sort of, I don't want to say required, but it's really desirable to have an infrastructure that's going to outlast the quake, right?
Yeah.
And my understanding was there was talk at the time of trying to have some sort of microgrid kind of focused on the new police station area as being that center of kind of resilience. This is maybe additive to that, but I'm kind of wondering how all this plays together in the plan long term.
Well, in the short run, or the idea is that while the Emergency Operations Center drives the activities that are needed for delivering whatever is needed in that disaster, communication with the local folk, community area, and activating CERT within that zone kind of brings the Emergency Operations Center to where it's needed critically for those first couple of days.
Yeah, no, I understand. I was just trying to see how it fit into the other, there's another plan that's associated somehow. It's going to come up in the future as well, right?
So as we get further, flesh this through, those things will probably get answered, Jeff.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Aaron?
Actually, I'm going to hold off. I think mine is better served for a written comment.
Okay.
So I'll just say thank you. Everything you guys do is amazing.
Thank you.
I especially like Kids Night Out. It is one of my favorite nights of the month. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Robin, do you have anything for now, or you can wait? You can wait. Okay. So thank you for your presentation. No, we're going back to, we're talking about that right now. So, all right, thank you all for your presentation. So right now we're going to get to our committee discussion. So we'll start with the first question. Are the proposed reductions acceptable to you? If there are any that are unacceptable, what would you propose as a trade-off? Anybody, anything that's not acceptable to you? And if not, what would you do as a trade-off? Just remember, we are, as a budget committee, we cannot direct operation, right? So trade-off means we have to move one bucket of money from the other. We cannot say, this department, you have to fund this. So just a reminder, that's our discussion. So Council President Wolf, please.
Thank you, Mayor. So I will jump in on our parks discussion. I think the timing of the opportunity to have these one-time funds from the completion of the park fund serves an opportunity to fill a gap for our parks. And I think the synergy there of those two and what our community expects in their parks is a tremendous opportunity. We took away $1.5 million in '25 in our general fund. And so I just feel like there's a real opportunity in the short run and the long run, as Councilor Schlack brought forward in council, to have these longer conversations about sustainable revenue. But in the short run, I think this is a real opportunity. So that's my request.
Is that doable? Is that because that's the bond, right? Can we?
That's certainly doable. And
Okay.
if I think for the following meeting, perhaps I could get some more detail.
Yeah,
Councilor.
follow-up question. Okay. All right. Aaron, anything unacceptable? If not, what would you like to see the trade-off?
Okay, so I think it is too early to go too deeply into this. I need to do a little bit more review. I also need to get some more answers, but I think that the proposed budget reduction for the library is overstepping. I do believe that I understand that there is a gap and it needs to be addressed in some way. I understand that we can reduce some of the materials on a potentially short term without as much direct impact. However, I do feel that the FTE, especially, without having more information, I'm going to say especially the social services coordinator, is going to have a direct impact on the city. I think it's going to have a direct impact on just as a widespread. We have a lot of, as we were talking about, unhoused neighbors. We have a lot of people who are on the verge of housing insecurity, food insecurity, and having that kind of safety net is not something that I feel like it is I'm going to go with moral thing for us to be considering removing at this point. I understand that this is not something that is existing in a lot of the libraries in the area, but I do believe that this is an opportunity for us to do the right thing first. As far as the costs, it is going to come down to how much the FTE is on that. I don't have a direct answer as far as where it would come from. I can look over this more in depth over the next week. And once I have some information, make a proposal, a direct proposal. But I do want to state for the record that I believe that that is something that we should reconsider.
All right. So you don't know if it should come from the police or from the park or recreation?
My recommendation would be that it would come from police.
Okay.
Police had a minor reduction.
One FTE, yeah.
Sorry?
One FTE.
One FTE, yeah. But they have a much larger pool to draw from. I believe that there are areas where we can make additional cuts, whether it's from FTE or other services within the police, to cover one FTE within the library.
Okay, thank you. Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A bit of a procedural question as to this question now in this meeting, are the proposed reductions acceptable? I guess I'm confused as to if that's a question to be answered now or if that's almost like an implicit approval of the budget.
It's a discussion point.
Okay.
Like Aaron is thinking without obviously you need more information and more thinking, but just preliminarily you would like to see we give library enough budget to fund that social services and possibly fund the police. So we can just do that right now if you have any initial thought. Go ahead.
If I may, Chair, as a recommendation, at this point, I know we're still early on in our discussion, so my proposal would be to form ideas on amendments, and then our staff can work with you to give you a calculation if you want to bring that forward at a future meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, very well, thanks. I mean, my initial reaction is the library cuts do feel a bit disproportionate. I don't want to be the pot calling the kettle black here because I asked the commenters to, not just say that, but also make recommendations. And I don't necessarily have one right now, but I would look forward to working through that over the next couple budget committee meetings. Thank you.
So you would like similar information that Aaron is requesting? Okay. Councilor Schlock?
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Council President Wolf's suggestion or recommendation around the triaging parks funding with the roll-off of the bond revenue. I feel like that was a word salad, but I agree with Council President Wolf's point there. Regarding library cuts, I already asked earlier for an understanding over the last few fiscal years of how it went up by $2 million, and now we're proposing a $2 million cut. And then specifically regarding the social services coordinator, I'd like to understand why that was a limited duration position to begin with, as opposed to a permanent position when it was created back in fiscal year '24. Like I said, I remember being very excited when that position was announced, along with a whole bunch of other programs across other departments during past budget cycles. I'd be very sad to see this position go, but I'd like to understand why it was a limited duration position to begin with, since I think that was part of the rationale for the proposed elimination of that position. Thank you.
All right, so I don't know who, I just go with Bill first, since, Bill, go ahead.
This is really a question for Eric. There was discussion about the elimination of open positions as kind of a one-time thing. Is that every open position was eliminated, or do we still have open FTEs, for example, in the police department, that speaking to the specific thing?
So there are still a few open positions, so not every vacant position has been eliminated, especially because certain vacant positions are still intended to be filled at this time based on business need.
Yusuf?
Thank you, Mayor. I echo Mr. McCool's concerns with the social services coordinator, and I agree also that I would like to take another look at the police area and see if there's some places where we can cut in there. So that's just my 2 cents.
If I could just make a quick comment, so to address Councilor Schlack's question on the rationale for why the social services coordinator position was a limited duration. So there, at the time, I believe this was in fiscal year '24, there was limited one-time funding available at the time to use those funds to pay for this position. So that it was a financial reason. Also at the same time, that's when we coincidentally started or had the grant agreement with Washington County to fund a houselessness coordinator position that provides services citywide, not just at the library. And that is a position that provides support for both Tigard, Sherwood, and Tualatin.
Councilor Robbins?
Thank you. I just want to clarify the funds that we're talking about that Council President Wolf and Councilor Schlack are talking about are the funds from what we just discussed last week, the supplemental budget where we paid off this. Does that have to go to Parks and Rec, or can we use it anywhere?
So there are no restrictions to those dollars.
So I think our Parks and Rec are very important and should be funded, but I agree that also the library funding is fairly extreme, the cuts compared to some of the other departments. So if there's a way we could spread that up across both, I would advocate for that. Or since the social services coordinator, I think, does excellent work and really takes some of the load off of some of the police officers who might have to come and respond to other lower level things that are happening at the library, if we could maybe kind of roll that into police department funding or somehow, like, I hate to say, well, cut the police, cut this, cut that, but I know we have to cut somewhere, but to save that position, I think would be vitally important.
Okay, Councilor Shaw?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you all for a very robust conversation. I too would agree with Council President Wolf as well as Councilor Schlack. The dollars that were taken from the parks and put into the general fund was meant to be repaid at some point, and so I'd like to see that done. With library services, it was a limited time duration. It was because there were one-time funds. I was hoping that we could have a discussion at the time and perhaps now about the houseless coordinator position being even perhaps responsible for that. I don't necessarily see this as a library core service, so I'm concerned about continuing that one-time fund from a limited duration to a permanent position. And also I'd like to explore IGAs with other organizations, whether it be Just Compassion or others, because I think there are some that are better suited full-time to be managing this potential position if it were to become full-time, which I would not support. And then right now, I think I cannot see us taking dollars away from the police at this time, but I know we still have a budget process to discuss as we move forward. Thank you, Mayor.
Jeff?
something a little different. So if people want to keep talking about the support service, I'll let that go. But if
Yeah,
not,
any
if not, then let's-
anything that you,
Yeah,
any budget cut you're not acceptable to.
Well, thanks. In the course of tonight, I've heard a lot of, one-time opportunities and kind of one-shots at the pie. And I start to see us now going into the reserves, and the projections from everybody who cared to give one didn't show the ship turning in terms of structural challenges that we face. And so I guess maybe it's more of a comment. I feel we owe diligence. If we're going to start bleeding into the reserves, we need an exit strategy. And I haven't seen, and again, this is not maybe the forum for that, but I feel like that needs to be part of this. And I kind of throw that back to the council, like somewhere the ship's got to turn, and either we keep cutting.
That's the next question I'm going to ask.
Okay, so
about reserve. So can you wait?
Yeah.
All right. So Aaron, any further thoughts on the first question?
It was just one follow-up as far as like getting information for.
Yeah.
As far as how much, if we, with the building the new parks, the moratorium on that, how much would that save if we can get that information? And also, there's a question about FTE, unfilled FTE at the park, or I think they asked about it at the police, but at the park as well. If there's any of those, so that we can kind of, and how much that would be, so that we can have an idea of where we can, what's available that wouldn't actually impact existing positions.
Yeah. So
or filled
we'll at the end, we'll go over the question that the staff will come back with. So let's go down to the next question for this. Oh, sorry. You're so close. I didn't see you.
It's fine. Thank you. So I do agree with my fellow councilors as well in terms of the funding evaluation for the Parks and General Fund. I did want to see what the previous years of park funding and loss were, excuse me, so that we see where we had that disparity in budget. So we saw that graph with the downturn. Where did that start?
Yeah.
I do think that it would be an idea possibly to embed that houseless coordinator position within the library so that, yes, they take on more responsibility, but at least we have a funded position there, theoretically. Agree with everyone about the disproportionate drop in library funding. Perhaps we can evaluate possible usage of the forfeiture funds with the PD and see how we can end up shifting some of that appropriately. And obviously, there's a humanitarian aspect to it, but it would help bolster the argument to show some of the fiscal benefit of the social services position for the next meeting.
Go ahead.
If I could just make a clarification on the forfeiture funds. So those very specifically cannot supplant. So we cannot take money out of the budget that we've already previously funded to use the forfeiture fund. So that unfortunately is not an option.
So in terms of planning forward, what would we be able to use it for and not necessarily fund? Not saying that we are funding something that we're currently funding.
We can come back.
I would have to, yeah, it might be worthwhile to have a written response on that.
All right, so for the first question done. So let's move on to the second question. The proposed strategy for fiscal 27 is to spend down on reserves to fund general fund operations. Does the committee agree with this approach? This will likely mean continued cuts will be necessary in subsequent years until new revenue sources identified. Jeff? Continue your thought.
You rephrased my question very well.
Okay.
No, I think, that's it. I didn't see that. I apologize.
No, nobody saw it.
It's, reserves are for this purpose, right? But usually they're enacted when you've got a strategy to get out of the problem you're in. And I don't, if I looked at this, and this was huge to digest.
Right.
A lot of funds, a lot of very small funds. I mean, and I wonder, trying to build our system off of these little incremental fees where there needs to be a different strategic approach. And I know we can't do it with property taxes, but that's the existential problem we face. And the more people we bring into our community, it's great, we grow, but so does this problem. And to me, every park we bring on, every stormwater retention pond, everything, our growth rate is skewed. And so the gap just keeps getting bigger. And so if we start dipping into the reserves now without an exit strategy, by 2029 we'll be out, is my read on the situation.
So for fiscal 27, you are
For
okay,
fiscal, well,
okay
for
with
fiscal
it?
27, I guess, tentatively, I
Yeah.
look across to all our council members to see like, what is the appetite to answer this hard question,
Mhm.
right? This is, maybe 2027, yeah, we don't have to bleed out as much because we squeezed another
Yeah.
couple million out of
Yeah.
a one-time bond, And so it's not as bad as it could be, but it certainly is looming, and you can
Yeah.
certainly see it's not going to get any better. And so it's really, I guess, a comment. I didn't see any egregious changes in reserves that threaten me. 25% reserve is still a really good
Yeah,
reserve.
yeah, it's still there.
But next year, it's not going to be 25%.
Right, and there will be more cuts.
Or we won't have any police.
Yeah.
Or the library will be shut down fully. So I
Yeah.
think that is the existential problem.
Mhm.
And I think, trying to save one position here and move things around, I think that might spread us over 1 year, but it's not going to get us next year. We're going to be back here with worse problems. And so
Yeah.
that was more of a
Good-
statement,
good-
maybe.
Yeah, thank you.
For
Council President Wolf.
Yeah, and I don't know, Eric, if the reserve slide could just be up on the screen, just as a reference point, if that's a quick jump. So I have two to a slide, and it's still a little bit of a, like that. So I guess my comments are, I do agree that reserve management is really important, and short run, long run, I think the Parks Bond money is unique. I think it helps us solve a problem that needs a longer-term solution, which I think council is aware of. So that's kind of where I am with that. I think our parks are huge to who we are, what we provide to community members. So that's where I guess I'm such an advocate to trying to build that bridge, recognizing it needs a long-term solution. I also had asked Director Kang about what is best practice on reserve rate, what is expected, and Director Kang made the comment that we haven't done kind of a reserve study. Again, this is a long-term solution, but to put that to council or a finance committee to really understand what that should be. So again, long-term solution, but something I want to throw out there as well. So I don't know if I really answered the question, but I think my biggest thing is we have these parks dollars. I think it is worth using, and I do appreciate Councilor Shaw's comment about IGAs. That's not about reserves, but it's like, what is the challenge there that's not working in our city, but it sounds like it's working in other cities in Washington County. So it's just also, how do we be creative with solutions? So thank you, Councilor Shaw.
Yeah, and also just I have a talk with Director Kang, and I think there's a general consensus of council to have a discussion about what is appropriate amount for reserve. So that's coming for discussion. So thank you.
I want to say on the record, though, I thought, in fact, I'd spoken to you earlier, when this came up at the meeting last week, it seems morally appropriate because it was taxed for parks. It seems morally appropriate to put it back to the parks because that's what people thought they were there for. So I agree with that in concept. It was the longer term thing that I was talking about.
Okay, Councilor Godussi, I didn't miss you this time.
Thank you, Mayor. In terms of looking at the reserve, in theory, if the bond were to pass, then that would reduce expenses of both facility rental and repairs by nearly $1 million a year. So that is something sort of looking forward that may be possible. So it's not like we would be going into reserve with nothing. And hopefully we should know that before the end of our budget cycle.
Fingers crossed. All right, so any other, are there trade-off or further reduction that should be considered? Oh, Councilor Schlag.
Yeah, just on the reserve topic, totally open to a longer-term conversation about it. I don't think it doesn't sound, it doesn't feel appropriate for the budget committee to say dip into that based on what we've seen so far. I feel like if we were facing a catastrophic loss in revenues, that's what this is called for, as opposed to increasing expenditures, which is what I feel like is really the situation that we're facing here. I also want to say, we have a bond measure that's coming before voters on May 19th. We have a AAA bond rating, which is really important for making sure that that bond is as affordable as possible for our community. So I'd be hesitant about any sudden changes that could impact that bond rating in the near term.
Yeah, we can borrow more cheaply for good credit rating. So yeah. So all right, let's move on to the last question. Are there any are there further trade-off or further reduction that should be considered? Or have we discovered everything for tonight? Go ahead.
I just want to say I thought I saw Derek Lawson's hand raise a couple of times on Teams and then pop away. So I just want to.
Oh, did he join us? I couldn't. I don't have my computer with me, so. Derek, if you raise your hand, please go ahead. Sorry, I didn't see you earlier.
It's okay. I think most of the questions have been substantially covered. Can you all hear me though?
Yes.
Okay. The only addition I had was, I wonder openly, to what extent a social services coordinator is duplicative when we consider the grant process that we just all went through with various organizations who came and requested funds. So, it just shows the depth and breadth of services that are within the community. Do we really need to add FTE to the library, right, to accomplish what is likely to be substantially similar? That was one piece. And then the secondary is that I would echo the ratio of reserves is related to our municipal credit rating. And we likely should consider that very diligently prior to beginning to draw down on it. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. And that's another question, right? How much it overlaps that position. And one of the question I want to ask, I guess maybe we can ask, well, I can ask now because we're going to any other question. Again, I also would really like to see those youth testify, but I don't want us to be here until 11 o'clock. So I have to make tough decisions. So, but I do really want to see, we have 0.2 FTE cut for the youth library program. So I want to see practically how that 0.2 FTE reduction worked, affect youth library service. So that's just a question I would like to see answered. So, any other questions you would like to ask, or go ahead, Councilor Schlack.
Thank you. So, in addition to the previous questions I had, there were two from the beginning that we moved very quickly through, so I thought I'd save them to the end. One, there was projected revenue increase of 6%. I think it was largely tied to IGAs. I would just like to understand which are IGAs that are under negotiation. There's nothing final there. We probably touched on a number of them on different departmental areas here, but I'd like to just get a list in written response to understand what those are. And then the second one, going back to the fiscal outlook, was the increase in health costs. I remember going back to our January budget meeting, that was a real key driver in our general fund expenditure. Like I mentioned a few minutes ago, this isn't a catastrophic reduction in revenues. This is steadily increasing expenditures, and that seems to be a prime driver. So I'd like to understand what's going on with health and benefits and personnel services that are really driving those costs up.
James?
Thank you for those questions, and some of those questions can be answered in the line item explanation of changes handout that you have in your packet there, as far as some of the IGAs and increases that you're seeing in some of those lines. But we can absolutely follow up next time with more information. Yeah.
Ethan? There we go.
Just a quick operational issue question that I wanted to give voice to about the timing for the commenters is, could we provide clarity somehow about what the time limits are? Just, I also don't want to be here until 11, but just so that the expectation is well understood.
Yeah, okay. So next time we'll have more clear instructions. Yeah, yes. Any other questions? Do you want the staff to read all the questions they have, or are we good?
I'd be happy to if everyone wants me to do that real quick.
Yeah, please.
Okay. And please let me know if we missed anything or if you need a change in narrative or anything like that. So question on libraries is, what is the cost of the filled library FTEs that are currently being proposed to be removed? How does the funding from county general fund and county levy compare to prior years? Also related to library specific recommendations as to what we could cut in the library instead of some of the proposed budget cuts. Also request for narrative of the changes incrementally in a narrative format between the fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2027 proposed budgets. Some questions around the PARF about what's charged per unit, both residentially and commercially. And a request for more information on funding from the supplemental budget and how we can utilize those dollars, as well as how much would the city save by holding off on new parks, both operationally and capital. I believe we already answered this, but some more information on police forfeiture funds and how that money can be utilized moving forward. What the overlap is with what's currently being done by the Library Social Services Coordinator and other initiatives and programs within the city, as well as the list of the IGA reductions and what those details are, and information on health costs and why we're seeing such large increases year over year. Does that about cover it for everybody, or did I miss something?
Just one clarification on the IGA, it's on the revenues. What revenues are we expecting from the IGAs?
Yes.
Aaron, anything else you want to ask?
So, one was just clarification on the library FTEs, just if those could be broken down per. I'm not sure if that's how you were going to do it, but that way, for the 1 FTE and the 2.2s, how much they are for each individual position.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, yes,
perfect.
sir. I actually have that now, but we don't have time, so yes.
Okay. And then the last thing, and I'm not sure if you said this, was the unfilled FTEs within park and police.
I did not mention that. We'll make note of that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions that James didn't write down? All right, so we are at the end of our first budget committee meeting. Thank you, everybody, for your patience, and thank you for the public, and I apologize for the frustration associated with the comment. Next time, we'll provide much clearer instruction. So without any further questions or consideration, we will recess for today and resume at our next scheduled meeting on Monday, May 11th at 6 p.m. Good night, everybody.